So we are going to start this meeting officially with my trusty gavel here. So welcome to the April 23rd Sandag Board of Directors meeting, 2021, April 23rd, 2021. So I invite you to join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so today we have structured things a little bit differently to make sure that we can get through all the business we have. So we need sufficient time for discussion and deliberation, of course. So we will be starting, if there are no objections, we'll be starting item number 14, which is regarding social equity in the regional plan by 9:30 at the latest. We're expecting several public comments, and we have some distinguished guest speakers from across the state who will be joining us today. We're really looking forward to that. So first up, you'll see non-agenda public comments. So we've sorted out the board member comments for later in the agenda, but right now it's non-agenda public comments. So Francesca, do we have any comments from the public?
Yes, Chair, right now I see one hand up. Mike Bullock, if you have a non-agendized public comment, you can go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you very much. Honorable Chair and board members, Mike Bullock from Oceanside. Regarding the Jack Shoe resolution, it directs your staff to consider, quote, at least a 30% per capita GHG emissions reduction from the entire on-road transportation sector by 2035, end quote. This should be viewed as a correction of the CARB-supplied SB 375 target of 19%, which is too small. SB 375 says that the reduction is in GHG for light-duty vehicles. However, it also says that you cannot count GHG reductions for what California or the federal government does. You can only achieve the GHG reduction target by improved zoning and implementing transportation measures. Therefore, the GHG reduction target is really a VMT target. This is the correct interpretation for the 30% reduction. If it includes fleet efficiency, it offers zero benefit. I have written a peer-reviewed plan showing a set of enforceable measures to result in LDVs achieving the industrialized world's first occurring science-based climate stabilization target. I will focus on the plan's driving reduction enforceable measures. The report shows that the 30% reduction in BMT should be 32%. I have 8 enforceable measures to achieve that 32%. The first enforceable measure is your RTP without the other 7 of my enforceable measures. That driving reduction is 12% for a factor of 0.88. The next enforceable measure is a road use charge. That driving reduction is 10% for a factor of 0.90. The third enforceable measure is to have a value-priced car parking system. That driving reduction is 8% for a factor of 0.90. These 3 factors produce a factor of 0.73, which is a reduction of 27%, which is nearly your desired 30%. All 8 factors produce a reduction of 32%. You have no chance without the road use charge and the parking system. The County Central Committee has adopted resolutions that describe suitable road use charge and car parking systems. And that concludes my remarks. So thank you very much for listening to that. I know it's a lot of detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. That does conclude the public comments.
Okay, thank you very much. So we will now move on to item number 2, which is the first reading of the proposed amendments to the TransNet extension ordinance. So the Sanday Board of Directors will be asked to approve the proposed ordinance at its meeting on May 14. But I will hand it over to Ariana now for the presentation.
Good morning and thank you. Thank you, Chair Blake Spear and members of the board. Good morning. You may recall that at your March 26th meeting, the board approved its draft fiscal year 22 program budget, and consistent with that approval, directed staff to bring back the implementation action before you today. The board's approval of your fiscal year 22 draft budget included changes to the annual TransNet apportionments consistent with the unanimous recommendation by the ITOC to amend the ordinance to increase the administrative allocation limit from 1% to 2%. The additional 1% would help ensure adequate resources are available to effectively administer the program, consistent with recommendations from recent TransNet audits and the agency's organizational assessment. The ITOC discussed this proposed amendment at its regular meeting in March and also held a special meeting where ITOC members discussed the proposed amendment at length. After a careful and thorough review, the ITOC concluded the proposed change would ultimately benefit taxpayers and the region to help further the purpose and goals of TransNet, and unanimously voted to recommend that the board approve the proposed amendment to the TransNet ordinance. In line with your approved draft budget, this is the introduction of the ordinance amendment. The board will be asked to adopt the proposed amendment and to adopt its fiscal year 22 final program budget at the May 14th board meeting. In accordance with Board Policy 4, the full ordinance must be read at either the time of the amendment's introduction or at the time the board considers its adoption, unless the board votes to waive the full reading. Please note that this vote would be only to waive the full reading. It does not pertain to whether to adopt or not adopt the amendment. That will be a separate vote at a future meeting. And that concludes my report, and staff is available to help answer questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the report. So the full title of the ordinance is San Diego Transportation Improvement Program Ordinance and Expenditure Plan, Commission Ordinance 04-01. So do I have a motion and a second to waive the full recitation of the TransNet ordinance?
This is Vivian, happy to make a motion.
And
Okay, thank you, Vivian.
Jack, second.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion and a second. So Francesca, let's, yes.
Chair, I had a question.
Okay,
The question for staff. I understand that ITOC has had an opportunity to review this proposed amendment and make the recommendations, but I'm unaware of that the board's had an opportunity to do that. So I'm curious if where this direction came from to put this in front of the board today.
So this was made a part of the draft fiscal year 22 budget, which was presented to both the executive committee in early March, and then on March 26th was approved by the board. And at that meeting, staff was directed to bring back this item.
So I recall the meeting and looking through the notes on that agenda item, I believe it says the board of directors is also asked to consider recommending changes to the annual TransNet apportionments for inclusion in the fiscal year 2022 program budget. But I don't recall the board actually discussing this separately and actually considering this separately.
So Mayor Bailey, if I may, this is, no, we did not discuss it separately, but last meeting, when you approved the draft budget, there were a discussion about why, actually significant discussion, long discussion about why this is needed. And after that discussion, the board approved the draft budget with the understanding that the amendment to the ordinance is going to come later. So there were discussions, insignificant one at the last meeting. I believe, I don't know whether you were there, Mayor, or your alternate, but there were significant discussion.
I appreciate that, but it seems as though that if ITOC had the opportunity to kind of discuss this separately, that it would make sense for the board to also discuss the funding source separately before making the recommendation, especially given that the staff report had said that the board would have an opportunity to consider a TransNet amendment, but not that we are actually moving forward with one. those are my comments.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Bailey. I see Mayor Hall has his hand up. Go ahead, Mayor Hall.
Yes, and help me, I haven't been in the last couple of years, but it seems to me that when we have things of this importance, and it's always been past policy and procedure, both at Standag and almost on every regional board that I've served on, not to mention my city, that first readings always get a vote. Did we change that somehow at Standag, or why is it we're not having a vote on the first reading?
I think I will let our legal counsel answer that.
I'm happy to. As Ariana mentioned in her speaking points, at either the time of introduction, which is today, or the time of passage, which will be a future meeting, the full ordinance must be read unless there is a vote to waive the full reading. At this point, there hasn't been a motion to waive the full reading, but should there be a motion and a second to waive the full reading? Excuse me, there has been by board members Moreno and Chu. So right now that is on the table for a vote to waive the full reading, and that is consistent with our past practice.
And I understand that we don't have to hear the full reading of the ordinance, but I mean, still we should have on the issue itself, should we not be able to vote on this? Isn't that been past practice?
It hasn't been, and it's inconsistent with your board policies. It's unique with an ordinance where that has to come back at two separate meetings. Initially, the introduction simply discusses it and you vote on whether or not to waive the full reading, but your vote on the substance of the amendments must be at a meeting that is at least 5 days subsequent to the introduction. And that is the point at which you can vote to either adopt or not adopt what is proposed as amendments to an ordinance.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Moreno.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I kind of went a little fast and didn't provide my speaking points. So I want to make sure that I thank staff. Ariana, thank you for bringing this item forward. This was fully vetted. It was included in the draft fiscal year 22 program budget, and it was thoroughly discussed by ITALK. Sandag staff is working harder than ever. And I think they're doing everything from producing a visionary new regional transportation plan, delivering the new mid-coast blue line extension, and continuing to work on short and long-term solutions to the threat to the transportation infrastructure from the erosion of the Del Mar Bluffs. I think all of this requires more resources. So an increase to the cap on administrative spending, I think, makes sense. I think this would enable the Office of the Independent Auditor to continue its necessary work as well. I am supportive of waiving the requirement for a full recital of the entire ordinance. We're only changing 2 words, and I think reading the whole ordinance out loud would be a waste of time for all of us. But as I stated earlier, I'm happy to make the motion, and that concludes my comments, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. So we do have a motion and a second, so let's go ahead and vote.
Thank you, Chair. For the City of Carlsbad, Mayor Hall.
Mayor Hall, no.
For the City of Chula Vista, Mayor Salas.
Salas, yes.
Thank you. For the City of Coronado, Mayor Bailey.
Bailey, no.
Thank you. For the County of San Diego, Supervisor Lawson-Remmer.
Yes.
Thank you. For the County of San Diego, for the City of Del Mar, Mayor Gasterland. I apologize. The City of Del Mar is absent this morning. For the City of El Cajon, Mayor Wells.
No.
Thank you. For the City of Encinitas, Chair Blakespear.
Yes.
Thank you. For the City of Escondido, Mayor McNamara. Mayor McNamara, could you repeat your vote for me? Mayor McNamara may be absent. For the City of Imperial Beach, Mayor Dedina.
Imperial Beach, yes.
Thank you. For the City of La Mesa, Councilmember Shu.
Yes.
Thank you. For the City of Lemon Grove, Mayor Vasquez.
Mayor Vasquez, yes.
Thank you. For the City of National City, Councilmember Rios.
Rios, yes.
Thank you. For the City of Oceanside, Councilmember Rodriguez.
Rodriguez, no.
Thank you. For the City of Poway, Mayor Voss.
No.
Thank you. For the City of San Diego, Councilmember Moreno.
Moreno, yes.
Thank you. For the City of San Marcos, Mayor Jones.
Jones, no.
Thank you. For the City of Santee, Mayor Minto.
Minto, no.
Thank you. For the City of Solana Beach, Mayor Hebner.
Hebner, yes.
Thank you. And for the City of Vista, Mayor Ritter.
Ritter, no.
Thank you very much. And that motion does not pass.
Okay, so just to be clear, on this, that means that the reading will happen on May 14th. So that we are finished with that vote, and we will move on to the next item, which is the Board of Directors. Let's see, where are we here? We're actually on consent now. So do we have any public comments or questions on consent? Well, I'll ask Francesca to look.
Thank you. We do have a hand up. Chris, could you confirm that you wanted to speak on an item on the consent calendar?
Did she say Chris? This is Mary Salas. I had a question.
Okay, go ahead, Mary.
Yes, I don't want to pull the item, but I did want to ask a question on item number 7. And that's where we're considering the active transportation program funding recommendations. And what I noticed in this was a shift in the priorities and funding. So for example, one of Chula Vista's projects was ranked number 2 previously, and now it's fallen to, I think, number 10. And then, so, you know, I did receive an explanation from Sandag that, you know, there were different criteria that were used at this time, but I'm really not understanding that. And just the other concern that I had is that so much of the funding going to one particular project, where isn't it better to look for different sources of funding on those projects rather than put so much funding into one particular project? In other words, spreading the love around to the region.
Well, that's a good question. Let's ask staff to respond to that.
Good morning. My name is Audrey Porcella, and this item came to the TC and I gave a full presentation. But to answer your questions, the regional competition is separate from the state competition. So they're 2 separate competitions and they have different criteria. So the way the ATP is set up is that regional regions are allowed to create their own criteria. So that's to be able to meet the specific needs of that region and the priorities that that region has. So to give you some idea of like what differences there are, the San Diego regional criteria has project readiness as one of them. We have demand analysis, which looks at where a project is located based on population, jobs, active centers, and how well those projects will be accessed and what kind of impact they have. Also, you might recall that as a part of the 2015 regional plan and environmental impact report, there was GHG mitigation measures that required these competitive grants to evaluate whether or not a jurisdiction had a climate action plan and complete streets policy. So that's just some differences between the statewide criteria and the regional criteria, but that is the reason why projects score differently between the statewide and the regional.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Salas, does that answer your question to your satisfaction?
Well, not really. I'll support the motion, but the question still remains is why there was such a significant difference between the state criteria and our regional criteria. I mean, it was really quite a bit. So I'll go ahead and support the motion because I'm sure that the analysis was done correctly according to regional criteria, but it's just a question of the differences that are so disparate.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I'm not sure if there was some crosstalk there. I was going to call him Supervisor Anderson.
I was going to tell Marcellus that I'll be happy to later talk to the mayor and satisfy her questions.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Anderson.
Yes, I just wanted to correct that in the confirmed attendance, I was present virtually for the April 9th meeting. It reflects right now that I was not present.
Okay, could we update that?
I'll make sure that's updated. Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you, Supervisor. Mayor Hall.
Yes, on the minutes of the meeting of 4/9, approximately 1 hour, 49 minutes and 35 seconds, alternate board member for the city of Del Mar, Honorable Dan Quirk, council member, asked 2 questions and requested answers from Sandag related to, are these key technologies, trend self-driving technology, ride hailing, connected car technology, battery electric vehicles, solar energy, are they covering to create a new form of inexpensive, clean, dynamic, and personalized mass transit on the highways and roads? Second, given these technology trends and the potential for mass transit on highways, should Sandag rethink or pause its consideration of spending billions of dollars on fixed line rail as part of the 5 big moves? I think some of these numbers as far as ridership show the low results, and I'm wondering if that makes sense given all these exciting new technologies coming down the pike. Staff responded that the panelists would answer the questions, yet the questions were never answered by Sandag staff or the panelists. So I would like to ask if we could please get the answers to those. And I would like to see those answers in writing if possible. Also, that the draft minutes include in the Sandag Board of Directors meeting agenda materials include Council Member Dan Quirk, City of Del Mar, asked if the key technology trends are converging to create a new form of inexpensive, clean, dynamic, and personalized mass transit on the highway and road mass transit, and asked Sandag to rethink or pause its consideration of spending billions of dollars on fixed line rail as part of the 5 big moves, given continued technology advances and low ridership of transit. And I think those were closer to his words than what were stated in the minutes.
So we'd be happy to put this in writing, Mayor, but let me just inform the Board of Directors that we have a discussion with the City Council of Del Mar this week, with Mr. Quirk was present, and the council voted to support the 5 big moves, but we'll be happy to answer the questions in writing like we did last time when we spoke to the council.
And I was going to ask something similar than what he did. He kind of was 1 step ahead of us. So I think myself and perhaps others on the board would like to have that information.
Be happy to.
May I add something to that, Madam Chair?
Yes, you may.
Yes, thank you for the question, Mayor Hall. And we've been collecting a whole bunch of questions from all the board members, including the letter, Mayor Hall, that you sent to us. And so we've been compiling all of the answers, and we want to put that together in a document. And we're really, really hopeful that we can get that all out to you next week. So we really appreciate your patience. We really appreciate the thoughtful questions that you're bringing forward, because we know these are important questions for the residents of the region as well. So just want you to know we have the questions. We appreciate the clarifications that you've made today with the in the minutes, and you'll be hearing from us shortly.
And again, what we're embarking on has a lot of detail to it. And so the answers have to have a lot of detail. And respect for those who are asking the questions, it's going to take some time for us to analyze the information you're sending us. And given the final date that we're going to have to start voting on this, we're starting to run out of time. So time is of an essence.
Just Mayor, Chair Blakespear, Mayor Hall, I mean, we will answer the question the best way humanly possible, but there is a lot of speculation in those questions. You know, speculations about when is driverless cars going to be there and when we're going to have the technology. We're going to answer in the best we can, but it's not like prove to me. I can't prove to you something that's going to happen maybe five decades from now, but absolutely, like Colleen said, we'll answer the question the best way humanly possible, and we have the best teams here to answer those questions.
Okay, thank you. We have a few more hands up from board members. So Mayor Dedina.
Yeah, I just want to make sure it's clear. My colleague from Chula Vista was asking about the RTP funding, the active transportation funding. Is that the difference between the state and then Sand Egg requirement? Am I clear on that? I just want to make sure, because we got one of those grants. I want to make sure we're not going to not get it, but is that what we were talking about, right? Or am I missing that?
Yeah, yes, that is it.
Yeah, I want to make this clear because, you know, I think it was like 4 or 5 years ago or 6 years ago, Sandag, thanks to many of us, took a decisive step in favor of social equity by making sure that those RTV grants reflected social equity rather than the current state guidelines and the current state of California, which frankly doesn't care about social equity. And where, you know, you have to have cash in the bank and there's outdated modes for just figuring out who has, you know, the Enviro screen, which is ridiculous and doesn't reflect anything to do with the reality of this county. So I'm grateful to Sandag that we've significantly changed the way that we address equity, and we're getting money into cities that need it, like mine, that we've had a huge investment gap or debt for decades, that frankly, the majority of monies in this county went to the wealthiest, most privileged areas, which frankly look way different than the southern part of the county. So I'm not questioning those funds. I am grateful to Sandag that we have shifted. We took a decisive step on equity, and we're shifting investment to the places that need it the most. And my residents, I'll make this really clear to my colleagues, could care less if Sandag staff spent all their time answering questions about minute minutes and 5 agendas ago, which I find crazy. My residents want us to spend our time putting money into road projects to make sure that when seniors cross the road, they don't get run over by a car. I'm embarrassed that we have a pandemic, an economic crisis, and a climate crisis, and we're going to spend time talking about a minute reading 5 meetings ago and how many questions we're going to answer and wasting staff time. My residents don't care about that. They care about public safety. They care about getting out of this pandemic. They care about working and having jobs. And they want to make sure we're dealing with the sewage crisis on the border and the climate crisis. So can we all get real here and just focus instead of wasting our time on this ridiculous stuff? Let's spend money and do good and not waste our time with all kinds of questions. So that really, frankly, maybe the residents of the wealthiest, most privileged communities have time to address. My residents don't care.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Gasterland.
Thank you very much, Chair and Mayor Blakespear. Hassan, I want to thank you and your team, especially Colleen and Ray Major. Hassan and Colleen and Ray responded within a few days to an invitation from Del Mar. With the bluff fall that we've had in Del Mar that's now at least patched together enough that the trains can continue to go by at 10 miles per hour safely, we felt it was time to have a conversation and really think about the 5 big moves and timing. And Executive Director Ekrada responded timely and well. They came to our council meeting and we had a 2-hour discussion, which was fruitful, productive. We worked through so many details. And I want to say that at the end of that discussion, we had a unanimous 5-0 vote for that the city council endorses getting the railroad tracks off the bluffs and doing it as soon as we possibly can. We also had a 4-1 vote endorsing the 5 big moves. We listened, we talked to Ray Major, we pulled the details apart, and we voted 4-1. And I want to just give one remark. I want to lay down a challenge to our board here. And I want to remind us that the single railroad track along the edge of the pristine, fragile coastal bluff through Del Mar reminds us every day of the intimate interface between humans and nature. Tourism has grown and the railroad's needs have changed. It's time for San Diego to grow. It's time to move the track. And the challenge I'd like to give is now is the moment to ask for federal infrastructure funds from the American Jobs Plan for the San Diego region, for exactly the region that Serge Dedina just laid out. Let's choose to ask for the $4 billion needed to build the tunnel. That's the high-speed tunnel option. That's the right option, and tie the track to the future of San Diego. We, the board, have no choice. It's our opportunity right now with these infrastructure funds that are coming, and our responsibility as the leaders creating San Diego's next transportation network. We must do this for San Diego, for our coastal bluffs, and for our region's future. The council voted 5-0 in Del Mar, and I invite you to join this. I challenge the Sandag board. Let's work together and do what it takes to make that happen by 2030.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Gasterlin. Just as a quick reminder, so we're currently on consent, and then after that, we're going to go to board member comments. So if there's one more hand up, Councilmember Rodriguez, we do have one public comment, and then I'd like to see if we could get through consent, and then we'll go to that next part. So Councilmember Rodriguez.
Yes, thank you. Item 4, the Policy Advisory Committee, they took some actions on moving forward on creating a subcommittee. And this particular subcommittee is going to be developing performance measures for the independent performance auditor, as well as to consider salary adjustments for her performance. And I also thought I read something about a subcommittee on choosing the public participants of the audit committee. Can staff elaborate on that? And how does that process unfold on who's chosen for the subcommittee?
Yeah, I can, Chair Blakespear. Yeah, there were a request to consider certain changes to the audit committee membership in terms of public members versus elected members. There were other issues raised. And so I think we thought, the chair thought that the best way around is to have an ad hoc committee of the board so they can discuss these things and recommend to the full board their conclusion.
Okay, so how are you going to choose this subcommittee? Because I would like to participate in that.
The chair of Sandag, Chair Blakespear, will have that responsibility of choosing the subcommittee members.
If I could clarify, I apologize, Madam Chair. I think what's referenced in the PAC actions is actually something that's already happened at the audit committee. The audit committee voted to create that subcommittee. That's a subcommittee of the audit committee where they report back to the audit committee. It's composed of audit committee members. And I think that they are agendized to report back on their recommendations at today's meeting. That is a subcommittee that's being referenced there. The selection.
Okay, but those individuals are not listed.
That's correct, and that is audit committee members, and I think that will be disclosed at today's meeting. I'm not aware of who is on that subcommittee. I don't know if we have any audit committee members who are present here today.
Stuart Halburn and Bob, the two public members, are the members of the subcommittee.
The audit committee is taking place this afternoon later, right?
Correct.
So they haven't made their decisions yet, right?
No, they did appoint the subcommittee last meeting. So the Stuart and Bob are the two public members who are the subcommittee, and they are going to come to the audit committee with recommendations, which then will come to the board. I was referencing that we're going to bring to you creating an ad hoc subcommittee of the board, actually at the next meeting, to discuss the audit committee recommendation, all of them.
Okay, so there will be more board discussion about this, Councilmember Rodriguez. So I think we have one public member who had a hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Chris Sotomayor, did you have a comment on something on the consent agenda?
I'm so sorry, folks. I actually wanted to really briefly let you know, we have several folks calling in to access translation, and it's really unclear on the agenda and on the Zoom how they can do that. Would somebody just verbalize that real quick for our constituents? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I'll look into that in just a moment. I'm not sure if we have translation services available today. I'm going to check with the production team and some other folks right now.
Okay. I'd like to ask the attorney, is it okay, Mr. Kirk, if we entertain a motion on the consent while we get that additional information provided?
Yes, at this point, you can entertain a motion on the consent agenda.
Okay.
Keebner, so moved.
Vivian Moreno, second.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's go ahead and vote.
Thank you very much. For the City of Carlsbad, Mayor Hall.
Mayor Hall, yes.
Thank you. For the City of Chula Vista, Mayor Salas.
Salas, yes.
Thank you. For the City of Coronado, Mayor Bailey.
Bailey, yes.
Thank you. For the County of San Diego, Supervisor Lawson Reamer.
Lawson Reamer, aye.
Thank you. For the City of Del Mar, Mayor Gasterland.
Gasterland for Del Mar, yes.
Thank you. For the City of El Cajon, Mayor Wells.
Yes.
Thank you. For the City of Encinitas, Chair Blakespear.
Yes.
Thank you. For the City of the City of Escondido is absent. For the City of Imperial Beach, Mayor Dedina.
Yes.
Thank you. For the City of La Mesa, Councilmember Shu.
Yes.
Thank you. For the City of Lemon Grove, Mayor Vasquez.
Mayor Vasquez, yes.
Thank you. For the City of National City, Councilmember Rios.
Rios, yes.
Thank you. For the City of Oceanside, Councilmember Rodriguez.
I'm voting no on item 4 because it lacks detail, but I am yes on everything else.
Thank you. For the City of Poway, Mayor Voss.
Yes.
Thank you. For the City of San Diego, Councilmember Moreno.
Moreno, yes.
Thank you. For the City of San Marcos, Mayor Jones.
Jones, yes.
Thank you. For the City of Santee, Mayor Minto.
Minto, yes.
Thank you. For the City of Solana Beach, Mayor Huebner.
Keebner, yes.
Thank you. And for the City of Vista, Mayor Ritter.
Ritter, yes.
Thank you very much. And that does pass. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. If we had an update on translation, go ahead and let us know. And if not, I will continue here. So now we are on to member comments on non-agenda items. I wanted to take a moment to recognize a few awards that our agency will be receiving from the American Public Works Association. So in partnership with NCTD, Sandag is receiving a Project of the Year Award for the Del Mar Bluffs Emergency Repair. In partnership with Caltrans, we're receiving a Project of the Year Award for the Build NCC San Elijo Lagoon Restoration Project. And in partnership with MTS and Caltrans, Sandag is receiving a Project of the Year Award for the South Bay Bus Rapid Transit Project. We're also being honored for our work on the Inland Rail Trail Phase 2. So this is all really great news. Staff will be receiving these awards on May 13th, but let us be the first to congratulate all of you on your hard work and bringing these critical projects to life. We know that despite the challenges we had in the last year, Sandag continues to deliver direct and meaningful benefits to our region's residents and visitors through these efforts. And on a related note, you may have heard that Sandag is shifting gears with our annual Bike to Work Day event this year, and we've announced it's called Bike Anywhere Week, and it's May 16 through 22nd. And Bike Anywhere Week has self-guided activities, virtual events that keep everybody safe. We're encouraging residents to do their trips to school, the store, the beach, work, just around the neighborhood to see friends on their bike. So you should have received an email with a toolkit of promotional materials and a survey if you would like a t-shirt. So please be sure to share any plans you have in your community for Bike Month, and staff is happy to help cross-promote that in your city. So those are the updates from Sandag. Do we have any other non-agenda member comments? I see Gustavo from Caltrans has his hand up. Mr. Delarda, go ahead.
Chair, I'm so sorry. Before we continue on, could we have, we do have interpretation on the line now. If we could let him do his announcement to, so that people can access that service.
Okay, great. Yes, please go for it. Go ahead. It seems like he's saying, Carlos is saying in the chat he can't announce because maybe he hasn't been promoted to a panelist.
Carlos, we've unmuted your microphone, so you should be able to speak.
Oh. Thank you. Good morning. Buenos días. As has just been indicated, interpretation is now available. The following will be an indication for our Spanish speakers. Muy buenos días. Ya contamos con el servicio de interpretación. Para hacer uso del servicio, por favor, desplácese a la parte inferior de su pantalla de Zoom. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación y seleccione Spanish como su idioma. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom, presione los puntos suspensivos, luego Interpretation y luego el idioma. In the event that there are comments in Spanish, you can also use the interpretation feature for interpretation into English. To use the service, please scroll down to the bottom of the Zoom screen, click on the interpretation icon, looks like a little world, and then select English as your language. If you are joining through the Zoom mobile app, please press the ellipsis, the 3 dots, then interpretation, and then choose your language. This concludes my message. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You have the most amazing broadcast voice. You must be famous.
Thank you so much.
Yes, okay, so now we're moving on to Caltrans. Mr. Delarda has his hand up, and then yes.
Thank you, Chair Blake Spear. I want to thank you also for recognizing and also thank APWA for recognizing some great projects that we've accomplished with our partners. I want to thank definitely all of our staff that worked on the San Elijo Restoration Lagoon project, as well as the South Bay BRT, alongside with SANDAG and MTS, of course. The 3 things, quick things that I wanted to mention. One is I hope that everybody had a great Earth Day yesterday. For me, I was humbled to join our maintenance forces, picking up litter from all of our highways, and it was a great day for me. I got to first experience what they experience every day when they're picking up litter along our highways. I think they did a fantastic job, along with our partners from Adopt a Highway, as well as our contractor that we called on to do a special cleanup yesterday. And it was interesting for me because, well, number one, I got a lot of exercise. I'm a little sore from that, but also working next to traffic was an interesting experience. And the media showed up, and they wanted to do some interviews. And one of the things that I thought was funny was as they pulled over into a closure, they say, "Can we go do the interview somewhere else? Because we don't feel good being behind these cones next to traffic." And of course we did. We moved to Mission Bay Drive to do the interview in a place where they felt a little more comfortable. But working alongside our maintenance crews, behind cones, 10 feet away from traffic, you realize how many vehicles don't when they see the cones and they see our hard hats, they don't respect the law. They have plenty of room to move over, and they just drive next to the cones, 65 miles an hour. And as you're looking down to pick up the trash with your litter getter, you see these cars barreling down 65 miles an hour, 10 feet away from you. It's a humbling experience. So I thank our maintenance for all the great work that they do day in and day out. Which brings me to the fact that next week is National Work Zone Awareness Week, as well as our yearly Highway Worker Memorial, which is when we recognize all the Caltrans people, as well as our partners that have lost their life in the line of duty. So hopefully, I keep talking about safety at all of these meetings, but hopefully you're all helping me to reiterate that message. And of course, next week we will remember the 2 contractors that we lost last November and December in San Diego County while they were working on State Route 94. And last but not least, tomorrow we will continue doing something special for Earth Day. We will be joining both state parks and the California Conservation Corps at the Silver Strand on State Route 75, and we will be helping out clean the state beach there, as well as the surrounding area on State Route 75. And some of our office employees that have adopted the State Route 15 bike path will be going out on their own time to pick up litter and maintain the bike path on State Route 15, as they have adopted it through the Adopt a Highway program. So that concludes my remarks. Thank you, and hope everybody's doing well.
Well, thank you, Mr. Delarda. Thank you for focusing on safety and the litter problem and spending Earth Day doing that. Both of those are urgent that we address, and I appreciate that you consistently spotlight it. Mayor Gasterland.
Yes, my apologies. I had thought we were done with consent earlier and we're on the board member remarks. So I'm not going to repeat myself, but I do want to say thank you again to the team that put the 16 pilings, it may be 15, it looks like 15, in the bluff and reinforced the railroad tracks. And I do want to get on record in this part that, that this railroad track is an intimate, fragile interface between humans and nature. It's the interface between the coastal bluff. It's the interface between tourism and development here in our area. And we in Del Mar get a million visitors per year to this coastal bluff and the beaches below. Data-driven planning has shown us where people live and work, person by person and job by job. The San Diego region needs freight and people to move smoothly from north to south and back. We need new capacity and speed. We also need to maintain and preserve our beautiful coastal bluffs. I have one right behind me here as I speak to you. The new emerging vision for San Diego's transportation future relies on a low sand corridor that is unfettered. So I repeat my challenge to this SANDAG board. I truly hope we can come together and do this for San Diego, for the coastal bluffs, and for our region's future. Now is the moment to choose the high-speed tunnel option. And it's the time, the moment to ask for federal infrastructure funds for the San Diego region, specifically for this. Let's ask for the $4 billion needed to build the tunnel and tie the track to the future of San Diego. Let's make it happen, this board, by 2030. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Gasterland. Now we have our executive director report. So I'll call on Hassan.
Thank you, Chair Blakespear, Vice Chair Gloria, second Vice Chair Stella Solis, board members. Good morning to all of you. SANDAG is moving forward with the CEQA environmental review for the Central Mobility Hub. On Wednesday, we achieved the milestone. We released the notice of preparation for the environmental impact report. As you know, in September 2019, the board approved the recommendation of the Airport Connectivity Subcommittee to explore development of a central mobility hub to connect transit directly to San Diego International Airport. The central mobility hub could connect transit from all over the region and is key to the mobility hub concept in our 2021 regional transportation plan. During the last year, we have worked on preliminary planning, had stakeholder engagement, a public workshop, and a public input. Through the environmental review, we will explore two potential locations for the Central Mobility Hub. The Navy Old Town Campus, which is home to the U.S. Navy's NAVWAR cybersecurity headquarters, and the intermodal transportation site located along Pacific Highway near Washington Street. We also will consider a trolley extension alternative. This project could improve regional transportation for generations to come. It also could provide enormous economic, housing, and environmental benefits for the region. I want to thank our partners from the Navy. I want to thank Mr. Dennis Cake, who, with Mr. Cake, we have several meetings to discuss moving forward. Over the summer, we're going to discuss how to move forward, but I'm grateful to his partnership and his team. We will provide many opportunities for you to learn about this project. But by far, this is one of the transforming projects. They're going to transform the region, not only from a transportation standpoint, from an economic and environmental standpoint. Again, the notice of preparation was released Wednesday night. On the regional plan, today you will hear from staff and esteemed industry leaders about social equity and regional planning. I am grateful these leaders can contribute to today's discussion. At your meeting next week, staff will be joined by representatives from state and local governments and local research institutions to discuss how the 2021 regional plan supports state policy and local planning across land use, climate, mobility, and equity. We have a very good news to share with you today. We received California Air Resources Board letter of approval for the methodology for our regional transportation plan. This is required by Senate Bill 375, which oversees the greenhouse gas emission technical quantification methodology. The letter reads, based on our review, staff believes there are no aspects of the submitted technical methodology that would yield inaccurate estimates of greenhouse gas emissions and does not have further changes to suggest. This is a big accomplishment for the agency. If you recall, we asked for an extension to do things right. And getting this from the California Air Resources Board means a lot to the agency and to all of us. Special recognition goes out to the hardworking SANDAG team. And allow me to just mention Elisa Arias, Antoinette Meyer, Tueri Fio, Phil Tram, Alison Wood, Wu Sun, Rick Carey, Zieng Guang, Crystal Ayala, Eva Sanchez, Susan Friedman, and Samantha Folke. They're all worked hard to make sure we get this letter. Thank you, staff. Another good news, earlier this month, SANDAG received a notice of proposed award from the California Energy Commission for $200,000 to develop a blueprint for zero emission vehicle infrastructure. With this funding, we'll assess existing fleets and infrastructure, identify barriers, and develop strategies that will help the San Diego region transition vehicles to zero emissions. SANDAG has been successful in securing more than $1.1 million in grant funding over the past few years. For the California Energy Commission Clean Transportation Program, we look forward to continue working with the Commission to advance clean transportation and achieve state and regional goals for greenhouse gas emissions. The work in Otay Mesa Board of Entry continues as planned. We are continuing to build infrastructure. Once we're allowed, we're gonna create some tools for the board members to appreciate the enormous work that's happening at the border. Del Mar Bluff, like Mayor Castellan mentioned, our teams continue to work with North County Transit District on emergency repair to the railroad. Last time I told you this work will continue through July. But I also emphasize that this is a temporary work. The corridor study we're doing is going to outline alternatives for long-term solution for the corridor. I am grateful for the Del Mar Council for giving us a couple of hours of great discussion as we move forward and making sure every part of the region get what it deserves from this plan. The Mid-Coast Rally, on Wednesday, Chair Blackspear, Vice Chair Gloria, and I joined Caltrans, MTS, and UC San Diego leadership at the future UC San Diego Health La Jolla Trolley Station to celebrate ongoing progress for the Mid-Coast Rally project. It is an amazing sight to see a project that took over a decade getting to be completed soon. Very soon, you're going to see these beautiful red cars running for trials, and later this year, this project, the largest infrastructure project, will open to the public. I want to thank Chair Blackspear, Mayor Gloria, for going, and not only going there, but climbing a temporary stairs many flights over. We look forward to the opening of this line. On Digital Divide and Smart Cities Workshop, yesterday we hosted a virtual workshop about digital equity. I want to thank everyone who joined, more than 100 people. Antoinette Meyer, who is the star in this arena in the state and the country, had a great panel discussing the impact of the pandemic and how we are gonna close that divide. I also want you to know that former Secretary of Transportation, Sunny McPeak, spoke at the meeting. She spoke to you earlier. We think this digital divide is an important discussion, and we had some discussion with Caltrans to hope to get some funding and some pilot projects that Gustavo from Caltrans District 11 and myself is going to push for getting some pilot for the 67 to lay out some broadband infrastructure. Madam Chair, that concludes my report. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that update. I'm excited to see that we are running exactly on time or not at all behind schedule. So thank you to everybody who's making that happen. Do we have any public comments, Francesca?
No, Chair, we don't have any hands from the public.
Okay, and I don't see any board member comments. So our next item on our agenda is the 2021 Regional Plan Social Equity. And this is a panel of Sandag staff and industry leaders who will provide an overview of social equity trends and draft social equity performance results that support the 2021 Regional Plan goals for a fair transportation system. So I will hand it to our executive director to start this off. And I just also want to really welcome our very distinguished guests today, because we have an excellent panel that has been invited and has said that they would attend. So we're excited to hear from you. So Hassan, do you want to start this item off?
Yes, Chair, thank you very much. Good morning, Chair Blackspear, Vice Chair Gloria, Second Vice Chair Satola Solis, members of the board. Today we are talking about social equity, an issue integral to transportation and our community as a whole. Many of you, and I want to thank your leadership in this, Council Member Moreno, Council President, Mayor, all of you for leading us into a place where we could truly discuss issues that has been ignored for a long time. There is heightened awareness of the importance of addressing equity issue and righting wrongs of the past, both in San Diego region and throughout the nation. In January, you voted to formally adopt an equity statement, which our team saw as mandate to take action right now in our current projects and programs. We are proud to put equity front and center in the regional plan, and I'm honored to be working with this board to lead on this issue. Once adopted, the plan will serve as the foundation for all of the work Sandag does. This is why it is important to incorporate diversity, equity, and inclusion throughout the planning process. We must acknowledge the past transportation decisions have divided neighborhoods, displaced families, and subjected some communities to more pollution, more noise, and more safety concern. We have a moral obligation to reverse these wrongs and make sure that as our region grows, we bring everyone along with us. As we develop the 2020 Regional Transportation Plan, we are making sure to give everyone a voice, especially those who have been left voiceless before. This is why I look forward to our panel and discussion today. Let me just say, the panel today, I am honored to call them colleagues and friends and competitors. They're the best in the country. And I'm sure you would agree after you listen to them. They're frank, they're to the point. And I hope they, like I usually hear them speak, let it all out. Your planning director, Colleen Clemenson, and your chief economist and chief economic data, Ray Major, will start today's presentation. So with that, Colleen, I'll turn it to you.
We can't hear you, Colleen. We can't hear you.
Thank you and good morning. We are in the final stretch to release the draft 2021 regional plan. You've heard over the last several months about how communities from throughout the region will benefit from this plan. The 2021 regional plan is for everyone, all 3.3 million residents of the San Diego region. Today, as Hassan mentioned, we'll be talking about how we are addressing social equity in the plan in a very meaningful way. We believe that every community has a voice. And in the development of the 2021 regional plan, we are paying particular attention to communities that have rarely had a voice in the planning process. We're talking about people of color, people with limited income, communities impacted by poor air quality, and our senior population. During today's presentation, we'll explain the social equity planning framework that our team is using to ensure that equity is at the forefront of everything we do. We will also share the results of our social equity analysis for the regional plan. Given timing issues that have arisen from one of our panel members, we're going to switch the schedule up slightly and go directly to our panel. And I understand all of our panelists are online. We've assembled an amazing group of known experts, just as Hassan pointed out, true leaders when it comes to transportation and equity. These are experts from our region, from other regions within the state of California, and many of them have national experience. Leading and moderating this esteemed panel is one of our local leaders in equity, former City Council President and founder of Toyon Strategies, Georgette Gomez. The former council president recently began consulting with us here at Sandag, and given her strong standing leadership on equity issues, we are so happy to have her as part of our team. And with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Gomez to introduce our panel and moderate this exciting discussion.
Thank you, Colleen, and greetings to everyone. Today's conversation is really monumental, and as you all know, I've been in front of this board when I was an advocate for Environmental Health Coalition. I was a member of the board as the council president for the city of San Diego, working hard to uplift social equity, environmental justice, whichever way we want to call it. And I know for a fact that these conversations are uncomfortable. They're uncomfortable because at times we're asking the board, staff, leaders to really think outside of our own personal backyards, to really think holistically. And today's conversation is about that. It's about tackling the issues that have led to decisions because of transportation, which have led to creating social inequities. So we really want to center the role that the regional plan can do to address and undo some of these decisions from the past. I want to acknowledge and really center a huge action that this board took not that long ago, which was the board unanimously voted to commit to social equity. Now let's talk about that. We have an amazing all-star panel today. I'll start by introducing them, and then we're going to go into some questions and hopefully leave some questions for the public. So I'm going to start with introducing Therese McMillan, who serves as the Executive Director for the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. She's a top executive for the Association of the Bay Area Governments. In her role, she oversees diverse portfolios that covers transportation, land use, and housing functions for the San Francisco Bay Area, which includes 9 counties and 101 jurisdictions. She was appointed by President Barack Obama to serve as the Deputy Administrator for the Federal Transit Administration, followed by serving as the Acting FTA Administrator. Therese served as Los Angeles County Metropolitan Transportation Authority Chief Planning Officer. Then we have Kome Ajiz. He's the Executive Director of the Southern California Association of Governments, SCAG. He has 3 decades of experience in regional planning and transportation, most recently as Director of the Planning of SCAG. Prior to joining SCAG, he served as the Chief Deputy Director of the California Department of Transportation, Caltrans. Then we have Togs Amishakin. Togs was appointed Director of the California Department of Transportation, Caltrans, by Governor Newsom in 2019. Previously, he spent 8 years as Deputy Commissioner with the Tennessee Department of Transportation and served in the Nashville Mayor's Office. Director Cook is chair of the Active Transportation Council for the American Association of State Highways and Transportation Officials, and is a member of the American Walk. He's board member of the American Walks. Arcela Núñez Álvarez is the co-founder and co-director of Universidad Popular, a non-traditional educational organization cultivating leadership, freedom, and non-traditional education, organizing, cultivating leadership, freedom, health, wisdom, and dignity. As a grassroots community representative, she brings a personal commitment, professional experience, and community-centered approach to participating in the community's civic and political life. She is embedded within a community that she has helped educate and mobilize with historic civic electoral firsts throughout North County, and is dedicated to promoting precious ancestral knowledge, community service, and civic participation. Dr. Núñez Álvarez is a Chicana immigrant who came from Mexico and settled in San Marcos, when she was 12 years old, with nothing more than her clothes she wore. Raised by a single mom who worked tirelessly in the sewing factories, earning minimum wage, she understands firsthand the struggles immigrant families face in San Diego County, and embraces the opportunity to serve and advocate for policies that will increase opportunity for everyone in our community. So as you can see, we have a really robust set of folks that are going to be talking about the importance of social what it can do to address this very issue. So I'm going to start with all panelists. I would love to have you all address the importance of integrating social equity into the work that you currently are doing in your agencies or your respective fields of work. How does social equity become more real than just checking the box, especially for government agencies? At times it just becomes an exercise. So how do we make it more than just an exercise? And how have you been doing it? And what are some of the types of solutions that you have introduced in your respective departments that you're currently working in or have worked on? I'll start with whomever would like to start with that question.
Well, I'll jump in. Again, thank you so much for the invitation to speak before you, and Hassan is a wonderful colleague and friend. And I'm pleased that we have this chance to speak about equity. If there was any time in our country, in our state, where this becomes a required conversation, it would be now. And Georgette, you mentioned that it's monumental to begin to incorporate that. And part of the challenge, I believe, in the past has been because it has not been addressed. It's hard for people to even know where to begin, right? And so one of the things that I did at LA Metro and then brought up with me when I came back to the Bay Area was the establishment of what's an equity platform, a way of thinking about equity in 4 really important dimensions to try to allow folks to basically get their head around an issue that sometimes can feel so large that they don't know where to begin. And I think that's incredibly important because the philosophy behind it is to infuse equity in every line of business of the agency. Not to have it in its own little box on the side, like, oh, here's our equity program, but to say, no, this has to cross-cut everything. And so, very briefly, and then I'll turn it over to the panelists, my friends and colleagues, there's 4 pillars to the equity platform. The first is define and measure. which is basically to say that we need to work toward a definition of equity, recognizing that there can be many, many definitions of what that means. But importantly, we also have to be able to measure it so we can see progress. The second pillar, listen and learn, is perhaps the most important. It's to recognize that inequities have been vested in communities that have not had a voice. And the first thing we need to do is give them that voice, a voice of respect, a voice where we listen first and hear their stories, as opposed to come in with our perception of what we think has happened in terms of what harm has been done. And very importantly, to ensure that there is a connection to the community at the outset and not at the back end. The third is focus and deliver, which basically says we can define and measure and listen and learn, but if we don't put change on the ground, we are not advancing equity. And that really gets to, for agencies like mine and Kome's and Hassan's and Tok's, it's this idea that within our programs, where can we make change that advances the positions of our employees, of our communities, of the services that we advance to improve the circumstances of those we serve as public servants. And then finally, the fourth one is train and grow, which is to say, there's a lot of ground we need to make up here. And we need to humbly stand up and say, there's much that we need to teach ourselves in terms of interacting with our communities with respect, of figuring out analytically how to measure harm and benefit so that we can really show impact in a positive way. And basically, to know the work's never done. So that's the core of how we begin.
Thank you, Therese. And you definitely highlighted a lot of the importance of how to really holistically address what social equity should look like. And more importantly, I think one point that you highlighted is ensuring that it's embedded on everything that is being discussed, because at times, for the most part, it's always been on the side. And I really appreciated you uplifting that. Tokes, would you like to speak on social equity and how it's embedded in your agency, and what are some of the solutions that have been introduced? All right. How about we'll go with Kome.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for the invitation. It's really a privilege to join this panel. Of course, Hassan calls. I have to say yes. I call him boss still. So, the notion of equity is not new to us in planning. Like Therese said, she was already working on this on a very concerted scale at LA Metro back, I believe, in 2017, 2018. In fact, I remember a conversation with her then. And we had been thinking about the issue of equity because the data had always been there. We always pride ourselves on environmental justice as a program that we took very seriously. But that was mostly to do no harm. In other words, do not let your programs harm disadvantaged communities more disproportionately than those that are not. And so we perfected environmental justice, but it was not enough. And so we had started thinking, as we were wrapping up to delivering our plan last year, to spend some more time on equity. Now, the events of last year obviously upscaled the whole discussion on equity and brought it to front and center. And so we're all having this reckoning on equity. I think the question really is, how do we make sure that the discussion we're having on equity is sustained through time? And secondly, how do we make sure that in fact begins to yield results where we reduce the inequities that are out there? For us, our board adopted a resolution in July on social equity. That resolution, amongst many things, basically provided us with with a framework within which to operate as staff. And then also forced us to look not just externally as to the programs that we implement at SCAG, but also internally, who we are and how we're reflecting the whole tenets of equity in all of our internal operations, hiring, promotions, and such. And so we sort of had to make a commitment to first learn, to first understand. And one of the areas that we started to look at is to look back at the history of inequities. And I heard Hassan talk about that, where in our field, transportation has had some negative effects on communities of color. And how do we go back and make sure that we restate that history accurately so we could show what had been done wrong in the past, such that we don't continue to build on that false foundation of inequities as we fill out our programs in the current. And so that was one commitment. Another commitment we made was to, as we were looking at that, in our case, went back and developed this baseline conditions report. We just published it last month. And basically it goes back and outlines what the baseline of inequities are in our communities in the SCAG region, such that we would then know if we're going to have any effect with the things that we're doing. And if we don't, then maybe we change course. And on top of that, we're also developing a racial equity early action plan. What are some of the early wins we can put in place to make sure that we plant the flag early and go from those wins to more sustained equitable environment in our region.
Thank you, Combs. Arcela, would you like to respond on that?
Yeah, I the pleasure of having this opportunity to be with this great panel of colleagues. I live and breathe equity and have done so my entire life, not by choice, but more because of the circumstances in which I had the opportunity to live and really to grow up. So I come from a community that has been marginalized, that historically neglected. I grew up with friends and neighbors that didn't have access to parks, to good schools, where our parents got up very early in the morning, to find rides to get to work at the locals. My very existence is both a testimony to the long struggle that civil rights advocates have had to change conditions, but also I was able to go to school, and I'm able to now as a professional come back into my community where I live, where I work, where I see my neighbors every day. Equity for us is in part an academic exercise, but on the other hand, it is our ability to live. It's our ability to work, to go to school. So when we started with a group of community leaders and educators, Universidad Popular, or the People's University, we found that after decades of civil rights struggles, people in our community were still not able to get involved in civic affairs. We didn't speak the language. Many of us, English is our second or third language. So what we began to do is to actually conduct a study called Cultivando Liderazgo, cultivating leadership or nurturing leadership. And what we found is that when we look at civic engagement indicators in our community, limited English speaking, low-income families were just being challenged every day. We wanted to find solutions, and through Universidad Popular, we were able to begin to think through non-traditional ways
of educating our community, of reaching out, of assessing our environment. And what we found with equity, again, is that it's really difficult to explain it, but those of us who live it, it's personal. And I really think that for us to be able to advance and to make changes in our community, equity has to be personal to everyone. It has to become a collective effort. It can be relegated to one section of our city or the neighborhood across the railroad tracks. Equity means wellness and health for everyone in our community. So through Universidad Popular, that's exactly what we've been doing. We have been utilizing Educación Popular, popular education, a tradition that is very natural in Latin America, where we use life and lived experience to be able to engage our community, to assess our surroundings, and to find solutions in a collective manner. We've had the opportunity to work with many of you throughout San Diego County. You've met many of our students. You've attended a lot of our pláticas and forums that we've had talking about transportation. So it's just great to be here and to be able to share our story and the stories of so many families in our community. Thank you again.
Thank you, Arcela, and you're right. You know, this conversation needs to center people, right, and make sure that we have that story in order for us to advance the solutions that are being discussed. So it's a good reminder as we continue moving forward. So this other question that I have is directed to Therese Ocombe or Comec. And just for the public, I know that we had Tokes earlier, but he's been having some issues, technical issues. So he might be joining us via phone, but we're not sure. So we still have some amazing folks that have plenty to discuss here. So hopefully he'll join us, but just wanted to let people know. So Therese and Combe, if you can really speak to, so there a lot of the agencies are creating their regional plan, and some of the discussions right now are being discussed about assuming various pricing scenarios on the development plans. Some of those include pricing of managed lanes, road usage, charge fees, or fees for vehicle miles traveled. How has your agency addressed the potential impacts of these types of pricing to vulnerable communities or especially low-income communities?
Well, I'll start, and Comey and I have talked about this a lot together. It turns out, just by way of context, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, we are also wrapping up a major long-range plan. So we're all in the same boat, so to speak, in terms of being at a point in time when we're looking comprehensively at our policies. And our plan is known as is Plan Bay Area 2050. And there's 35 strategies in the plan, and pricing clearly is one of them with road pricing. And Georgette, your observation is right on target, that one of the first things that we put on the table there was this idea that the impacts on low-income drivers had to be a front and center concern. And just, by way of also context for all of us, it points to sometimes these complexities of potentially competing objectives, because greenhouse gas emissions was a major driver in our long-range plans in terms of these really tough targets that we had to meet. And as we all know, climate change has an incredibly disproportionate impact on communities of color, has been for a long time. So when you look at the package, and in our case, we needed to look at pricing, we needed to look at more transit, we needed to look at more electric vehicles, just the whole 9 yards to try to meet these targets. At the same time, recognizing that all road tolling or express lane tolling could be a point where it was, a burden. So we're looking at means-based tolling today on our express lanes. We're going to be launching a pilot to look at a differentiation of tolls based on ability to pay. And that has to do with our current express lane program. We opened one, for those of you familiar with the Bay Area, on Interstate 880, very congested corridor on the eastern part of the Bay. And we're launching a specific program, again, motivated by the equity platform, to look at means-based tolling. What we learn from that will inform the strategic development of next steps for road pricing in our long-range plan.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think first one, we need to establish why pricing. Oftentimes we don't spend enough time telling folks why this is a necessity. While we're looking at it, we argue over whether it's going to be good or bad. I think to establish the fact that we have a system that is very finite in the roadway system, and we find that at times of the day everybody wants to use it. Not everybody really is compelled to use it at that point, but there's no incentive not to, hence pricing. And pricing then has two potential results. One is it allows you to provide priority use for those who must use it, and those who don't have to use it will stay back and use it as a more opportune time. So that's one. So it helps to solve some of the congestion problems. Secondly, it begins to also be a source of revenue. But having said all of that, how does it affect folks that are low income? I think examples have already been in place, and we'll continue to experiment on ways to ensure that there's no disproportionate impact. I think in the Los Angeles area, the managed lane system is actually looked at, and it's actually implemented opportunities to help low-income folks be able to afford to use those managed lanes as well. So it's not out of the realm of possibility to have a graduated scale of how you pay for the use of the roads. What we're doing further is in our, because it's part of our regional transmission plan, we just did ours, that Sandag is getting ready to finish. We just finished ours, and pricing is a very major component of our strategy going forward in terms of reducing congestion and greenhouse gas emissions. And so we also are looking in terms of implementation, how we can be sure that local decisions, because we were also looking at pricing not just on the main freeway system, but also on local arterials. So we're working with community-based organizations who have more access to those communities that are affected disproportionately, to bring them to the table. First, to have an understanding with them on what the issue is, bring them to the table and help them also feed back into the process of developing these pricing policies at the local level. So I think there's opportunities to do better beyond what we're currently doing, but we have to say that there's no excuse to not recognize the disproportionate impact that pricing could have and fix it, because we can't continue to exacerbate those inequities.
Thank you, Therese and Kome. And I think we have Tokes on the line. So I'll ask you the same question, Tokes, about we're having a conversation about pricing within the development of our regional plans. If you have any input on making sure that this strategy of doing various pricing scenarios that includes some of the pricing of managed lanes, some are road use charge fees, or also fees for vehicle miles travel, how those ideas are not also overburdening folks that are already impacted by having very low income resources. So how do we ensure that this idea, which I think there's a good argument that was pretty much detailed right now, both by Therese and Kome, doesn't impact the vulnerable communities? Folks? All right. I'm not sure if he's there then. Well, can't hear him. So we'll go with Arcela. If you can speak to how can we ensure that we're investing in a fast, fair system that is built to create opportunities for our students, for our youth, and also how do we, because for a majority of the discussion of the regional plans, those voices tend to not be included as much. It's I think there needs to be intentional engagement of our youth to ensure that they're at the table as we're developing transportation plans that at the end of the day will impact them. But how do we ensure that we're investing in the system, that the intention that SANDAG is wanting to do is to create a fast and fair system that is efficient? How do we ensure that it's delivering for students?
Absolutely. I think that is one of the key issues in the discussion around transportation justice. I was so glad to read the update from our colleagues that this month or last month, the MTS board approved a reduction of the youth one-way fares from $250 to $125. And I think this is the kind of step that we need to be looking at implementing. One way to continue to monitor whether we address needs of the youth and really vulnerable families is by allowing for community engagement to continue to be part of the process. I think SANDAG did a really phenomenal job getting input from youth and from families. We were involved in that process along with a dozen other community-based organizations that worked for the last 2.5 years, provided input and helped to connect the ideas and to test them on the ground, to work with college students, high school students, and entire families so that we were able to actually have authentic, meaningful input where youth and families were able to describe the needs that they have, the routes, the challenges. We were able then to capture these stories and collect these surveys and information to facilitate discussions with the youth themselves and actually to provide recommendations to SANDAG. And this is the kind of civic engagement model that will ensure ongoing accountability so that we continue to monitor what the needs are in the community and whether we're truly addressing them. So I'll say that for now.
Thank you, Arcela. And I appreciate the acknowledgement that the board did on trying to reduce the fares for youth. I think it's important, and I know that there's been a discussion about hopefully moving to a free system for youth that will hopefully be part of the near future. So continuing to build upon the accessibility of transit. So, we talked about pricing, we're talking about social equity, and I would say that within all of this, we need to build the political will to be able to do all these plans, right, and strategies, and really ensuring that we're lifting up the most vulnerable in the work that we're doing. So this is for any of the panelists. How critical has political support been towards advancing social equity in your plans to achieve your equity goals? And how have you folded the expansion of decision makers that normally they're on the fence, they're not fully bought in, they don't understand, they're trying to protect because they represent perhaps not a community that fits the criteria of social equity of vulnerable communities. So they're trying to represent their constituents. How do you get them to understand the importance of doing this for the benefit of the greater good?
Well, I think where you start is just education. And I'm not just talking about educating others, but I think educating ourselves and the process, helping others to learn. What we cannot look away from is the preponderance of data and information about the discrepancies that we have between communities in terms of education, in terms of health, wealth, income-based. All of these things tend to be very clear along racial lines, especially. And so the question then is, why is that, and what can we do about it? And I think given the discussions that we've been having nationally, even globally in the last year, the reckoning we've been having about racial injustices, it's this data, this base information that we've lived with for years is now staring us in the face, and we cannot look away. And so that's where we start from. And I think for us at SCAG, it was important for our board members to come together on a policy document. That was a resolution they adopted in July of last year, stating that racial injustice is in fact a public health crisis. And then we've seen other jurisdictions adopt the same. We were not the first by any means, but we've seen that statement. I think that statement is important for politicians, the policymakers to come to grips with the data that we've been working with, and then begin to state categorically that this is unacceptable and something needs to be done. And then we need to begin to engage communities in how we do that. In our case, our board called for an establishment of a special committee on equity. What that did is expanded the conversation beyond just the board meeting. So we had this committee that included folks from different walks of life, different sectors of the economy, and board members to have a more detailed, a more in-depth conversation about inequities. And we're taking that early action plan to back to our board for consideration in the next couple of weeks. So I think it's really about education. There's no silver bullet. People need to come to grips with the reality of the fact that there are in fact inequities. The question is, what are you going to do about it? It cannot be that there's nothing you can do about it. And so that then begins to compel action. But the action, by all means, has to also involve the people you're trying to keep in consideration. The people of color, the communities of color, communities of concern, they need to be part of the conversation in devising the solutions that brings about the solving of the inequities.
Thank you.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. I think we may have Tokes back on the line. I just wanted to break in and confirm really quick. Is that you ending in with the phone number ending in 929? We've unmuted your microphone so you can speak.
So maybe while we're fixing that.
Sorry about
Why
that.
don't we go?
Yeah. Should I jump in?
Yeah, go ahead.
The caller dropped again. Sorry about that.
So that's fine. Poor Tokes, because first of all, he's an amazing perspectives, and it's really sad that we can't share them. I'd like to pick up maybe on some of the same themes that Kome outlined, but put them in three specific tracks. The first is that data is really important. Talking about equity is often the most successful in the political realm, talking about inequities where you have the facts to back it up. And that has been something that I've learned from my time at the federal government, LA Metro, with the Bay Area, and Kome had mentioned that specifically the report that he put together. When you outline with facts, you need to respond to them. Now, we all know circumstances when that's been avoided, but generally, our local elected leadership knows that that is at the core of the business and why they're there. The second point, and this is something I've learned I think has been very important, is changing this narrative that it's either or. Dr. Manuel Pastor, who was a great mentor for me when I was working at LA Metro, among others, did some really compelling work to say, you don't have to trade off investing in equity and investing in economic growth. When you do invest in equity, your economy is better. And so being able to really frame things as either collective harm within equities or shared benefit when equity is advanced is an incredibly important part, I think, of the political discussion. And the third, and this is sometimes a really tough conversation, is the realization that bringing people to the table is incredibly important, but it can't stop there. It has to also be sharing the power of decision and outcome. And that shared power narrative and objective and goal and commitment is something that's hard. It's hard to do, but if that doesn't happen, and whether that shared power is in the boardroom or in parallel decision-making structures that perhaps haven't been created before, it needs to be thoughtfully and intentionally pursued if we're going to really, Georgette, address the points that you made.
Thank you. Thank you, Therese. Arcela, did you have anything? I do have one more question to ask, but I'll give you an opportunity.
I did want to add to what has already been said, and just to say that there are moments, and I think this is one of them, where we have the opportunity to really create a landmark kind of process. And that's what I think we went through as participants in the planning for the development of the regional plan. So having stakeholders that traditionally are not only ignored, but really excluded from these kinds of processes has to be front and center. Allowing those voices to be part of the conversation and to guide the way that decisions are made. It needs to be part of every conversation with elected officials and everyone else. So we find that having the opportunity to educate each other and to learn together, there might be elected officials in our local jurisdictions that haven't had the opportunity to really work in some sectors of our community, and being able to come to the table together to discuss and to learn from the process and experiences has been very valuable.
Thank you, Arceli. And I believe we're gonna move to Colleen. We're gonna open it up to the board now to ask some questions. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Colleen.
Thank you so much. Thank you all. Director Misha Khan, I'm sorry we didn't get to see a lot of you. We appreciate how hard you tried to connect with us from your remote location. Executive Director McMillan, Executive Director Ajise, and Dr. Nunez Alvarez. Thank you so much. We have about 10 minutes for questions from the board, so I'll hand it back to you, Chair Blakespear.
Okay, well, thank you so much. That was an excellent panel, and I really appreciate seeing our former board member, Georgette Gomez, here chairing it, and all of the other esteemed members of the panel. So thank you very much. I will call on the board members who might have questions. So Mayor Hall.
Yes, first, I really want to thank Sandag for putting this on. For me, this is really a learning experience in trying to keep all this in perspective in many, many different ways. And so the question I would like to ask, does project labor agreements, which represents less than 20% of the workforce, does that really represent social equity?
I would say, and and Kome, you maybe certainly have some things to say here. It is part of the proverbial toolbox of things to bring voices to the table that need to be heard in the very complex delivery of major projects. To the degree that often our labor unions represent a diverse community of workers, and very often can represent the local community where access to employment is a really important objective. It can be part of, again, the combined approach of advancing equity. But I think it needs to be that, it's not a checkbox, yes or no. It's, what are you trying to achieve with respect to having project labor agreements as part of a delivery program? And thinking through what you're trying to achieve on your equity objective spectrum.
That's a great question, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, it's a great question, Mr. Mayor. I think the first question is, why do you need a PLA in the first place? And I think the simple response to that, in my mind, would be because a group is looking for an assurance that they would have a seat at the table, and that some equity is assured by having a formal agreement that guarantees labor's part in a project. We have federal regulations that assures or calls for disadvantaged business enterprise participation and these things that are not necessarily built into our normal process. So they're required by law. And I think that's one of the reasons you have the PLAs. But by no means does that solve the equity problem, because it's about, again, thinking broadly about equity is about making sure that every segment of society gets equal benefit from the expenditure of public resources. So how do we do that? How do we assure that? It's a very imperfect world, and the PLA is just one tool that could be positive. In some cases, it could be negatively used as well.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board?
I see Mayor Wells has his hand up. Go ahead.
Sorry. I appreciate this panel, and I appreciate the discussion. I want to ask some hard questions, and I want to say it respectfully because I really want an answer. We talk about equity, but we talk about equity of opportunity versus equity of outcome. And I'm a big believer in equity of opportunity, and not so much equity of outcome. Also, when we're talking about this, we oftentimes, at least for the people that are contacting me and talking about how frightened they are of where the country's going, they talk about the fear that this kind of concept, social equity, is really a way to sneak in a discussion about critical race theory, about Black Lives Matter, about violence in the streets, and about Marxism. So can you explain to me, first off, the equality of outcome versus opportunity, and then what am I supposed to tell my constituents, and frankly, half the country, about what's happening with critical race theory? It seems like racism is going from one direction to another, but we're promoting racism more than we were before. And it seems like it's very frightening for most Americans to think about Marxism taking hold in America. So thanks very much for taking these hard questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I'll start with Kome. You mentioned through your answers on many of the questions about the social reckoning that we're seeing. Why don't you start if you have anything to say on this?
Yeah, I appreciate the question, Ms. Mayor. I think it's a very important question that we need to be honest and face on, because we're all in this together. You know, where I begin to look at it is, I don't know that, for me personally, I don't know that it's a productive, because I don't know how to do it, it's a productive argument to debate the difference between equity of opportunities versus equity of outcomes. What we are dealing with, which is a drag on all of society, is in fact the outcomes of past inequities. And we continue to build on those inequities. And I think the discussion we're having today is, how do we address the inequities? If in fact the burdens of poverty, the burdens of poor education, the burdens of ill health are all aggregated along racial lines, that calls the question, what is the difference? Why is that so? How do we fix that? I don't think that is necessarily a thing to worry about in terms of whether or not we're focused so much on equity of outcomes. I think what we're trying to say is that there is a reason why there's this disproportionate impact, negative impact, amongst all of folks in our communities, in terms of what the outcomes have been in those lives. And those outcomes have now become a drag, continue to be a drag on all of society. I think Therese addressed mentioned earlier on about the fact that if we begin to address the inequities in society, where we have just taking a look at the effect of COVID-19, where the disproportionate number of frontline workers were people of color, and so they were mostly impacted, and therefore they were subjected to all of the pathologies of COVID-19, more so than other parts of society, where there were some folks that could not work from home like I can, and it was disproportionately, again, people of color, because that's the kind of jobs that they do. And we didn't protect many of them from that. How do we make sure in the next pandemic that doesn't happen? I think that's the kind of conversation we're trying to have, and make sure that the majority of the kids that don't have access to distance learning are also not just necessarily because of racial lines. So these are the things that we need to grapple with. I think it will continue to be situational as we go from one program item to another. We need to face very squarely what are the impacts of the programs that we're enforcing or we're implementing, such that it does not bring about a disproportionate, a negative disproportionate outcome on some parts of society. That's the way we assure some equity in society.
Thank you, Kome. Therese or Arcela?
You know, I think Kome addressed all the points that I would make. I would just put out another one, Mr. Mayor, that you mentioned. We do need to more effectively, as professionals such as myself and Kome, and politicians such as yourself and the board, and certainly my board, the reality of fear. And fear of change is something that's endemic to the human spirit, whether it's our teenagers or whether it's our broad constituents. But we have to be honest about the fact that the fear of change is often rooted in the change itself is going to be bad. And as Kome just pointed out, if we are in a position to acknowledge that current circumstances are not okay, that people are being disproportionately harmed, and the facts bear that out, then we need to have a collective decision of what it takes to get to a different place. And that is change. And that in and of itself, we need to acknowledge that that can be extremely unsettling, but it's also, at least in my opinion, a moral responsibility for us in a decision-making role to take that on, have a place to express it, and have a place to resolve it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if I could add just a moment, I love that question, because I think it really gets to where our nation is at and where our communities are at. I have a very simple response. What I see on the ground in my community and in communities across San Diego County, across California, and across the nation is that we are all looking for ways to ensure that our children have the best opportunities that they possibly can have to live, to learn, to be able to work, to be able to be housed, super basic needs. And for me, that's what equity is about. It's both opportunity and outcome. You can't separate one without the other. I continue to think about what we can do to make sure that every child has the same opportunity. You're absolutely right. We shouldn't have to look at the past injustices, and we don't have to. We can just begin by making that change today, right now. What can we each do collectively to make a difference? That's all.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Nunez Alvarez. Chair Blakespear, is there another question or should we
Yes,
be wrapping it
so
up?
we have 3 hands up, but I'm going to call on just those 3, and then we're going to move on to the next part of this, which is a staff presentation. So I'll call on the 3 who are here already. So it's Councilmember Shu first.
Thank you, Chair Blakespear. And first, let me say to Mayor Wells, I hope you don't find me as a threat, or your constituents don't find me as a threat that we're going to take over El Cajon. I really appreciate this panel and the answers I've heard so far to many of my questions. So in the essence of time, let me just ask, in trying to sway public opinion, to try to flip them to understand things like road pricing, can you give me one gem of what you might do or information that you would try to educate the public on this whole issue? Thank you.
Oh, I don't know about one gem. But I think one way to look at road pricing is because it's anything that's finite means we got to figure a way to manage it, and we have just never managed the roadway system. We have this notion of a freeway, which means everybody can jump on any time. But if you put a price on it, then people will rethink the priorities of use of that system and then pick a better time that's more conducive. We have learned over time to not run a dishwasher and a washing machines during the day because there is a higher premium to pay on electricity because it's, again, finite. And so we all wait until the lower rates to run those machines. I remember very clearly a decade ago when we don't make long distance phone calls until the weekend because it was a higher rate. And so that's the same notion that we're talking about. It doesn't mean you couldn't use it. It just means if you're going to use it at the same time as everybody else, then you should be willing to pay the price for it. And the effect of it, though, the effect of the pricing is we become more efficient in using our system. And that efficiency then translates into a higher capacity for transit can be had. We also can build other modes as a result of the revenues generated, and we can also reduce air emissions as a result. So it's got like a triple, quadruple bottom line by being able to price a system adequately.
Therese, any gems?
Just allow for the questions to be asked. As Kome said, it's a complicated, very multi-layered solution. So my only gem, I guess, would be to keep talking about it because it takes a lot to absorb the complexity, but you need to have people understand it in order then to have a higher level of acceptance. So keep at it.
Okay.
Okay.
What's the next board member?
Yes. I think we have Mayor Minto.
Good morning. Thank you. Just some quick comments. One was in relation to what Mayor Wells was saying. It has to do with outcomes. And I can tell you that since we're talking about disadvantaged communities, people that have come from lower social economic areas, social economic, discrepancies, I'll use that, or financial embarrassment maybe. It's important for us to remember that there has to be an outcome if we're going to help them. I know that this is the background I came from. Broken home, lower social economic scale, lower, the whole thing. I was somebody that was didn't have a great outlook on where I was going to be in my lifetime. What made the difference for me, though, is the fact that I was engaged with adults in my schools that were involved in service clubs, for instance. And service clubs are something that are almost gone away because usually it's people my age that are involved in them. It's not young people anymore that are involved in them as much as it used to be. So these are things that we can look at maybe helping as a government and supporting. Is, these things that engage our youth and teach them about being well-rounded and how to be in the market for business. I know that as a police officer, I worked in disadvantaged communities and we created programs to help kids. And I worked with a lot of community-based organizations. The problem I found is that many of these organizations came up with some great solutions to some of the issues. Problem is, they only did it as long as there was funding. And funding is always an issue. So why is it that we always engage organizations that have short-term goals? Because it's only about funding. So it makes you ask the question, are people really in it to solve the problems? Or are they in it to solve the problem because that's the way to get money? Because once the money's gone, they move on to something else. So those are things that we need to talk about also, because that's what's going to help us, I think, get us the broadband out there to people that need it. It's also going to get people into transportation because they will feel safe. They will feel that it's there for them and they feel comfortable. And I think that for us to be talking about this has to go so much beyond, oh, well, people are, having difficulties in their community. Well, we know that people have difficulties in their community. And what I want to hear more about, I think, is what are the solutions? Because as long as we've been talking about this, I haven't heard a lot of solutions. I don't know if we're maybe just not to that point yet, but I want to start hearing solutions. What are we going to do? What is the finite answer, if there is such a thing? So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And I think you're going to see what SANDAG staff is proposing as part of the solutions to the draft transportation plan that y'all have been crafting. So you're going to see that following this panel's discussion, but I'll give an opportunity to have the panelists respond to you if there's any responses. But I'm going to uplift what Therese said earlier, and I think Helmut also shared as part of the work that they did in their plan. I think it's critical that as SANDAG is developing the regional transportation plan, as social equity is being centered, what are the matrix? I mean, you're speaking to the importance of highlighting that so there is a reference point. And then once you start implementing the plan, you're referring to the activities that are getting implemented to those matrix. So I think that's very crucial. I don't know if any of the panelists have anything in addition to say.
I would offer a couple of three things that have been very important realizations in our plan and how we're going to be moving forward with it. The first is these issues, and I think you characterized it, board member, as outcomes, they are often very complex and they're not one-dimensional. What we have come to realize, for example, is that if we don't tackle the housing affordability crisis in our region, we cannot tackle the transportation issues. They are inextricably linked in many cases, and the disproportionate burden is often in our lowest income communities. And so we've recognized that our strategies also can't work in their little silos, that you need to start thinking about, as you just said, what are the causes? The causes are very often multidisciplinary, which requires an equally complex solution. That said, pick up a point you just said. If you're going to do the solution, you have to commit to the revenues. And you have to commit to them in the long term, not just the short term. That sustained investment to create change is a key part of it. And that will often involve, in a resource limited circumstance, trade-offs. And so it also about the value, relative value of addressing these issues and the resources it will take. And I go back again to what Dr. Manuel Pastor pointed out, is that in doing that, it is often not an either or as much as what objectives help deal, what investments help deal with a number of improved outcomes as part of the decision. And so just to say, it's complicated, it's not easy, but we have to commit to, you know, the challenge of dealing with complex problems and the resources it will take to change them.
Just 30 seconds. I think Mayor Mentor, you did actually begin to address some of the solutions. I appreciate your question. And I think what you laid out is how complex it is. And Therese talks about that. This is intersectionality of issues. And so these things intersect across, housing, transportation, leads to poor health outcomes, leads to poor job outcomes. And then there's a continuous cycle. And of course, education becomes impacted as well. So being able to deal with this as holistically, we find ourselves where our agency maybe 20 years ago would mostly talk to transportation agencies as colleagues in developing a plan. Today, we talk across the board. We talk to health folks, public health folks, we talk to the education folks, we talk to folks in ag, we talk to the business side. And so now the people around the table of the regional planning process, as SANDAG is done, is a little more complicated and more complex because these issues intersect quite a bit to be able to get the solutions right.
Thank you.
Okay.
I believe there's a final question.
Yes, we're just going to go to the vice chair, and then Councilmember Rodriguez will come back to you at the next time that we're taking comments. So go ahead, Vice Chair Gloria.
Thank you, Chair. And I will be brief. I know we have some other work to do this morning. I just want to maybe more of a comment overall, because I hear my board colleagues struggling with this issue. And I think that's why you agendizing this conversation and this extremely high caliber panel of speakers is extremely helpful. I myself struggle with these issues, and I really rely upon our former council president, former board member, for her help in guiding through this, as well as Councilmember Vivian Moreno, who has been a leader with the working group that brought us the social equity platform that we approved just a number of weeks ago. I'm glad to be a part of an organization that's grappling with this, as has been mentioned multiple times, complex, difficult, not necessarily any easy solutions. But I don't know about you all, but if we were looking for easy, none of us would be in public service, right? There is an easier way to be engaged in your community. All of us stood for election to tackle some difficult challenges. And we find ourselves serving in one of the most difficult environments ever, from a pandemic to economic recession to a number of racial and equity concerns that are raised. I just am grateful that SANDAG is attempting to endeavor to work upon this. And I'm really proud of the fact that we did pass a social equity platform that I think will help guide our decisions going forward. And in terms of solutions, I would just simply point out that we spend $1 billion, more than $1 billion through this organization annually. And we can choose to expend it in the way that we always have, or we can choose to try and align it to address some of these concerns, not because Sandag can cure all of them, but because we can be a contributor to solving some or solving our portion of them. So Chair, again, a great appreciation for you setting aside some time to discuss this. Thank you to Georgette Gomez and to the board. And I look forward to working with all the board members to figure out the ways that this plays out in our individual communities and as a region collectively. We have a regional transportation plan that we'll be adopting later this year. To do it without a lens of equity would be a mistake. And the way that we push back against making that mistake again is by having this conversation this morning. Again, appreciation to everyone who's been involved.
Well, thank you very much for those comments. That was an excellent way to summarize. I think just a big appreciation to the panel. And we are sorry about the inability of the last panelist to make it, but you, the three of you and Georgette, you did an excellent job, so interesting. And this is what we're trying to do, is really grapple with these difficult and profound issues and to come up with solutions. So thank you very much. To the rest of the board members, we will have a chance to come back to questions. I'm going to turn it to Colleen now to move on with the rest of the work we have today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chair Blakespeare. And I tell you, as your staff here, we greatly appreciate the questions from the board members. It really helps give us insights as we continue to prepare the regional plan. So now what we'd like to do is just kind of recap where we are in terms of our timeline. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we're in the final stretch to release the 2021 regional plan at the end of next month. So this presentation today was the 5th in a series of presentations that we've done to prepare for the release of the draft plan. In August, we outlined the vision for the plan. We explained how we use data and the 5 big moves to develop a transformative transportation system that addresses congestion, social equity, and will meet our state and federal mandates. Over the fall, the team did the work of entering all the details of that vision into our transportation model and conducted the analysis necessary to turn the vision into a plan. In February, we explained that work. We shared the key planning assumptions that went into the model and the initial performance results coming out of the model. We reported that we will meet the aggressive greenhouse gas reduction targets mandated by the state. And one of the things I wanted to mention and just refer back to Hassan Akrada in his opening remarks talked about the letter that we received from the Air Resources Board that indicated their approval of our methodology to calculate the greenhouse gas reduction. And they have approved that methodology. So that's great for our region. And we're definitely set on the course to make sure that we have a plan that will absolutely meet that state mandate. We also shared that the initial performance showed a dramatic increase in the number of people who will have access to fast, frequent, and affordable transportation. We also shared what improvements and programs could be expected by 2035, and that's the mid-year of the plan. Last month, we shared the detailed data and assumptions that were used to develop the plan and published that information so it's available to all of you and to the public. We also explained the cost estimate for the 2021 plan in comparison to the 2015 plan and laid out a funding strategy that could actually bring this plan to life. And just 2 weeks ago, we discussed the disruptive technologies that are already changing the transportation industry. So here's what the agenda looks like for today. You already heard from our expert panel. Now we will begin with a staff presentation to help set the stage. We'll start with Ray Major, Sandag Chief Economist, who will discuss the diverse makeup of our region, population trends, and how greater equity can contribute to our local economy. Then Tueri Faola, Sandag Principal Planner, will describe our social equity planning framework for the 2021 regional plan. We will also hear from San Diego City Council member Vivian Moreno, who chairs our regional plan social equity working group. She will join Tueri to explain how social equity is being informed by the Social Equity Working Group, and the working group is providing a forum for communities that have traditionally been left out of the planning process. Finally, Tueri will wrap up by explaining key equity performance measures to ensure that the draft 2021 regional plan will address equity in a truly meaningful way. And then we'll turn it back to you, Chair, for additional questions and discussion by the board. So in terms of legislative mandates, just a reminder of what these mandates are that relate to social equity. State Senate Bill 375 and the Federal Clean Air Act set important state and federal environmental rules to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and air pollution. Senate Bill 375 specifically requires that we reduce vehicle miles traveled, otherwise known as VMT, per person. The primary way to achieve this is to shorten the distance people drive and for people to share rides. The California Environmental Quality Act and State Senate Bill 743 require that new transportation projects do not increase VMT. This means that roadway widenings, which increase vehicle miles traveled, must include transportation elements that are known to reduce vehicle miles traveled, such as transit projects, bikeway improvements, and improvements that will allow for sharing. And most relevant to our discussion today is Title VI, which states that no person, and I quote, on the ground of race, color, or national origin, be excluded from participation in, be denied the benefits of, or be subjected to discrimination under any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. The 2021 regional plan will ensure that we continue to be in compliance with these civil rights and environmental justice requirements. But there's a lot that's new since our last plan. While previous regional plans have incorporated social equity and met the requirements defined by Title VI, there are several new factors to consider. Since the 2015 regional plan was approved, Assembly Bill 805, this is State Assembly Bill 805, was passed. This bill included many changes for Sandag that this board is already very familiar with. It also set forth environmental justice requirements. Tueri will cover this in more detail during her presentation. And also, as was mentioned at the beginning and by our vice chair, there's a new equity statement that this board adopted earlier this year, which really puts a focus on equity for everything that we do.
In recent years, the issue of social equity and rising economic inequality have come to the forefront of the national dialogue. From an economist's point of view, the resulting economic disparity is problematic from an economic development perspective. Our recent experience with COVID-19 has shown that not all of our residents were equally impacted by the pandemic. We found that areas with high concentrations of people of color were more likely to be affected by COVID. We also found that low-income communities were disproportionately affected in terms of job loss. Over a year since the pandemic started, nearly 100,000 San Diego residents are still without work. High-income earners have all but returned to their jobs, while nearly 1 in 4 people earning under $27,000 a year are still without employment. The disparities were further pointed out as the COVID-19 crisis highlighted the impacts of the digital divide on some of our most underserved communities. Nearly 1 in 4 households earning less than $50,000 are without broadband subscription. This resulted in somewhere between 20 and 40% of students lacking home internet access. This significantly impacts their ability to learn during the past year. And the inequality was also pointed out in our rural communities, where 6 out of 10 people do not have access to fixed internet. Persistent economic disparity makes it difficult for large segments of our population to realize their potential and more fully contribute to the region's economy. This really shortchanges the economy in many respects. Greater economic equality enables more people to engage and add value in ways that help the economy perform better overall. There are tangible economic and fiscal benefits from closing the earnings and wage gap, and these include significant boosts to long-term economic growth. We measure this as gross regional product, or GRP, a better skilled and more productive future workforce. This is one that is ready to take on the technological challenges that are rapidly happening as we speak. And increased tax revenues to support federal, state, and local programs resulting from higher paying jobs. And fewer people needing social safety net programs. Inequality and economic disparity are big, complex issues, and they're very multidimensional with many possible causes. And standard methods of economic evaluation fall short of measuring the true costs and benefits. In the years to come, the Sandag data science team will research new methods of quantifying this problem. Using the data that we have, there are 3 underserved communities that have been identified whose needs are addressed in the regional plan. They are the low-income populations, our senior populations, and communities of color. There's no question that the San Diego region is an expensive place to live. Our cost of living is 60% higher than the US average. With the exception of healthcare, everything here is more expensive than the national average. But what really stands out is housing, which is 2.8% as expensive as the nation, and transportation costs, which are 20% more than the rest of the nation. It's no secret that our region is extremely auto-centric, meaning that there are very few practical alternatives for most people to driving an automobile. And the average cost of owning a car in San Diego is nearly $12,000 a year. As you can see on chart 35% of households in the region earn less than $45,000. We consider these to be low-income households. After taxes, the $45,000 becomes $36,000. $36,000 for a family to pay for its rent, utilities, food, clothing, and transportation. Over 400,000 households, or roughly 1.1 million people in our region, fall into this category. The practical necessity of owning an automobile to get to work, go shopping, and drop kids off at school creates a barrier to economic equity in the San Diego region. Many of our residents must choose between spending a significant portion of their income on transportation or finding alternative ways to getting around. And as we've presented to you many times in the past, there are currently very few good alternatives to driving. Yes, there are pockets in the region where walking, biking, and transit provide choices for residents, but not for the vast majority of our region's population. Even people living in the most walkable and bikeable communities would find it challenging to traverse the urban areas for employment opportunities or to experience many of the region's amazing activity centers. So many of our residents must forego economic opportunities like higher education or better job opportunities because of the physical layout of the region and the existing transportation system that only provides one viable mode to moving around the region. This is a real issue. And the 2021 regional plan addresses this problem by creating alternatives to driving. By employing the 5 big moves to address many of the shortcomings of the current system, this translates into real economic opportunities for our region's residents. The graying of San Diego is fast approaching. During the time period included in the 2021 regional plan, our region will be changing from a relatively young community to one that demographically looks more like a retirement community in Florida. This graph is a population pyramid. It shows our region's current population by 5-year age increment, with males on the left, females on the right, babies on the bottom, and older people on the top. And as you can see, the majority of our population in 2010 was less than 60 years of age. Well, these are the baby boomers, and they're now beginning to retire. You'll also notice a relatively long bar for males ages 20 to 24. This accounts for our military population. This graph shows the distribution of age in 2050, the horizon year of the plan. And as you can see, the region is getting older. By 2050, 605,000 San Diegan residents will be 75 or older. And over 1 million will be age 65 plus. This is not a crisis now, but very soon we will be confronted with the hard reality that 1 in 4 San Diegans will be over the age of 65, many living on fixed or reduced incomes. And our current transportation system is not designed to deal with this unprecedented demographic shift. What's more, these seniors are not going to be confined to home. They will be healthy, active, modern generation of dynamic seniors focused on their total well-being. They will need access to medical facilities, recreation activity centers, shopping, and more. Transit, flexible fleets, and mobility hubs address the needs of seniors by providing efficient and safe alternatives to owning and driving a single occupancy vehicle. These will greatly benefit this newly growing segment of our population. The San Diego of 2050 will look very different than the San Diego of today. But first, let's take a look at what San Diego looked like back in 2000. In 2000, the white population represented 55% of the total population, with people of color representing in aggregate 45% of the population. 16 years later, the white population was no longer in majority, and it represented 46% of the total population. The fastest growing ethnic group were Hispanics, who now represent a third of the total population. By 2050, the white and Hispanic populations are projected to be nearly equal, and people of color will comprise 60% of our total population. As Tueri will show in detail, and as is evidenced by the data I spoke of earlier, our communities of color coincide with low-income areas. These communities are the most vulnerable to being left behind as the technology revolution transforms every aspect of our lives in the coming year. The 2021 Regional Plan is designed to foster greater economic equity, enabling our region's residents to access opportunities that will result in significant boosts to long-term regional economic growth. It's a plan that facilitates a better skilled and more productive workforce, one that by definition provides an increased tax revenue base to support federal, state, and local programs, and ultimately reduces the number of people needing access to public support programs. It is one of the first regional transportation plans of its kind, one that not only addresses the reduction in VMT and GHG, but one that addresses social equity in a meaningful way and provides economic opportunities for our most disadvantaged communities. I'd like to now turn it over to Tueri Faola, who will give you the details of this framework.
So as part of the planning process, staff has been committed to centering its work through the lens of equity. To advance the goal of providing a fair transportation system, a regional social equity planning framework has been developed in partnership with SANDAC working groups by presenting it to different audiences and considering best practices in equitable planning. Through this process, we have identified 5 interreliant actions that form the basis of the SANDAC Regional Social Equity Planning Framework. This includes data accountability, how we use it, and how it informs our work. Measuring impacts, understanding both the benefits and the trade-offs of our plans, programs, and projects. Prioritizing investments, a topic area that had important and thoughtful board discussion around funding and prioritization of investments within our under-resourced communities earlier this year during the development and adoption of the equity statement. Monitor, report, and evolve, ensuring we commit to ongoing monitoring and reporting to evaluate the actual benefits or negative impacts of our work. And last, but certainly not least, engagement, ensuring an engagement process that is transparent, fair, and inclusive. And these 5 actions rely on continuous learning. We must be open and adaptable to how we approach, incorporate, and prioritize social equity in our plans, programs, and projects. This framework has been used in the development of the 2021 Regional Plan and will continue to be used and refined and enhanced throughout its development and implementation. Putting our equity statement and equity planning framework into action, we have contracts that provide funding to 13 community-based organizations listed here and are represented by the circles on this map. Together, they make up our social equity working group. I would like to now invite our chair to invite our City of San Diego Council Member Vivian Moreno to discuss the important and meaningful engagement of this group.
Okay, well, thank you. This is a great kickoff here, really interesting information presented. And I'm excited to welcome Councilmember Moreno. She is the chair of the SANDAG 2021 Regional Plan Social Equity Working Group. And you have all done great work so far with that equity statement and your commitment to it and giving voice to it. So I just really want to welcome you today and say thank you for being here and talking to us. And I'll hand it to you, Councilmember Moreno.
Thank you for that introduction. I'm proud to chair the 2021 Regional Plan Social Equity Working Group, which is composed of community-based organizations from throughout the county. The Social Equity Working Group is a public forum for communities that have traditionally been left out of the planning process to have a voice in the development of the 2021 Regional Plan. My role as chair is to amplify the voices of the Social Equity Working Group members and to ensure that their views and the concerns of the communities they represent are put front and center in the decision-making process. In San Ysidro, Barrio Logan, Southeast San Diego, City Heights, El Cajon, Linda Vista, Escondido, Vista, Oceanside, and San Marcos, the community-based organizations that make up the Social Equity Working Group have been listening to their communities and advocating for their concerns in every part of the county. Now, as trusted organizations in their respective communities, the the Equity Working Group members use different strategies and techniques to engage their constituents. From transit and taco pop-ups, to imagining how mobility hubs might look in their community. The most common request made by all communities was for safe, reliable, affordable access to transit options that can get people to their jobs and other destinations. Community members were thrilled at the emphasis on providing high quality transit access, but concerned with how technology might affect how they access the system. So addressing the digital divide is key to making the system work. Now, rest assured, the pandemic didn't stop the engagement. Even though the CBOs were dealing with the impact of COVID-19 on their community members, they continued to engage using food distribution networks and drive-by parades to share the vision. In fact, they designated and carried out a community mobility needs assessment in each of their communities to understand better how to connect their communities to the system. The interactive map tool shared in English and Spanish helped to show how projects in the plan will impact their respective communities. Now, producing outreach materials in various languages enable our CBO partners to connect with their community members in Zoom meetings. Now, with that, I'm going to pass it over to our next presenter, or I believe I'm going to pass it back over to Tueri. Thank you.
Thank you. So in addition to all of the feedback and input we received from our Social Equity Working Group and the communities they represent, we engaged and listened to our tribal partners. San Diego is the home to 17 tribal nations located within rural parts of our county. Providing better access to connect their communities to others and to advance opportunities for economic, social, cultural, and community development is critical to advancing equity. We have often spoke about this plan embracing a data-driven planning approach. Embracing new data and using data to inform our decisions comes with data accountability. This means we have to not only look at the numbers, but engage with our community and bring their input into the planning process. Social equity within the regional plan looks at several impacted communities within our region. People of color, low-income populations, and our senior population. And communities impacted by poor air quality, as shown in the red and orange colors in this map. As you can see, the areas with the highest concentrations of underserved populations have a significant overlap with areas that have poor air quality. The 5 big moves have been used as the key strategies to address the mobility needs and concerns that we have heard from our communities. It provides a transportation system that allows for more people to have greater access to jobs, education, and healthcare, all of which contribute toward economic equity. To make our system fairer, the regional plan needs to increase access to transit and employment centers with new technologies and concepts like mobility hubs, flexible fleets, and the Next OS. This slide shows our 3 social equity focused populations. The map on the left shows our communities of color, the map in the middle shows our low income populations, and the map on the far right is our senior population. Putting in place the proposed network, you can see that it improves access for our underserved communities, giving them true mobility options. In addition to transportation investments, there are supporting programs and policies proposed in the plan that support other equity considerations. These new investments include things such as transit fare subsidies for low income and youth populations, and housing grant programs to encourage new affordable housing in mobility hubs, while also ensuring our investments do not lead to displacement. Now let's take a look at the social equity performance measure results coming out of the draft 2021 regional plan. Today, we're going to discuss approximately half of the social equity performance measures, which are a subset of a much larger number of measures that are completed for the plan. These were identified in partnership with our social equity working group and other stakeholders, and they allow us to measure the impacts from a social equity perspective. One of the obstacles to economic and social equity in our current transportation system is that not enough people have reasonable access to an alternative to driving alone. As mentioned before, there is a significant underserved population in the San Diego region. Across all underserved populations, only about 1 in 10 people have access to an alternative other than a vehicle. As you can see in the chart here, the 2021 regional plan triples access to alternative forms of transportation in the region by 2035 for all of our underserved populations. And these numbers continue to improve through 2050, the horizon year of the plan. The blue dots on this map represent our region's colleges and universities, junior colleges, and vocational schools. Educational attainment is more important to our communities of color and to our low-income communities, as shown in the yellow and orange dots on the map, for economic success than ever before. Increasingly today, more jobs are requiring a skilled and more productive workforce, which creates a growing need for college-educated workers. Currently, only about half of these groups can access higher education within 30 minutes on transit. With the proposed investments in the regional plan, we provide more competitive transit options to higher education institutions, which continues to improve by 2050. Providing economic equity means having a transportation system that provides competitive alternatives to driving alone in terms of time. Today, some of the longest work trips are taken by people from low-income households. In some cases, people spend as much as 2 hours or more each way to get from their home to their place of employment. A faster transit system and a more expansive transportation system allows for a much larger percentage of our underserved population to get to work in a reasonable amount of time. Let's look at transit access to Tier 1 employment centers. These are the blue areas on the map. They contain most of our corporate headquarters, manufacturing, and government jobs, and they represent nearly 1 out of 4 jobs in the region. These employment centers contain some of the highest paying jobs and the highest job growth areas with the most economic opportunities in the region. Currently, about 40% of people of color and our low-income population can get to these areas on transit within 45 minutes, and even fewer can get there in less than 30 minutes. By 2035, our system will provide significant improvements. More than half of these people can get to the Tier 1 employment centers within 45 minutes. And as you can see, those numbers will continue to grow through 2050. We see similar results for transit to Tier 2 employment centers, where another 304,000 people are employed at places like retail centers and hospitals. That's 1 in 5 jobs in the region. Currently, a little more than half of low income and people of color can access Tier 2 employment centers within 30 minutes. By 2035, the
The proposed investments of the plan bring substantial gains to those numbers. And by 2050, about 2/3 can get to work in 30 minutes. More than 80% can get there in 45 minutes. One thing this pandemic has shown us is the importance of access to medical facilities. As you can see that right now we have pretty good numbers in this category, but these numbers will continue to improve by 2035, and by 2050, we begin to approach near universal transit access to medical facilities. The ability for people to access retail to shop for necessities such as groceries and clothing is critical no matter who you are. However, many low-income populations and communities of color experience food deserts where quality goods and services are not offered in their neighborhoods. The ability to expand access to retail throughout our region for these communities is vital for improving health and for furthering our region's economy. By 2035, approximately 2/3 of our underserved population will have transit access to retail within 15 minutes, with additional increases shown in 2050. State Assembly Bill 805 requires an environmental justice approach to developing the regional plan. This includes developing transportation strategies to reduce pollution exposure to disadvantaged communities. For the 5th year in a row, San Diego is ranked as the 6th worst region for ozone pollution in the United States. The San Diego region has 37 census tracts in the top 25% of the communities most burdened by pollution in the state, which can be seen in this map in the dark orange. Pollution isn't limited to those communities alone. There are other areas within our region that vary in their pollution exposure, as shown in the gold here. The 2021 regional plan provides mobility options, such as transit, flexible fleets, and active transportation, that when coupled together can help alleviate air pollution burden on these underserved communities. There are also supporting policies within the plan to reduce pollution burdens on underserved communities. An example of one of those policies is the adoption of electric vehicles region-wide. This policy aims to incentivize and encourage incorporation of all types of electric vehicles into flexible fleets, transit leap, and goods movement. That's trains and trucks. It also supports funding programs that increase electric vehicle charging stations throughout the region and within mobility hubs. Regional collaboration will be key to achieving pollution reduction and seeing the fruition of any of the performance measure outcomes that we have discussed today.
The persistent inequity and economic disparity in our region make it difficult for large segments of our population to realize their potential and to fully participate in and contribute to the regional economy. We're talking about 4 populations. We're talking about low income, people of color. We are talking about seniors, as well as communities that are subject to poor air quality. The regional plan lays out specific solutions to help to address these inequities. It's about access to education. It's about access to higher paying jobs. It's about access to goods and services, the necessities for life, and access to quality healthcare. And for the populations and communities that are subject to poor air quality, it's about a clean transportation system. The 2021 regional plan proposes a system of transportation improvements, supporting programs and policies that, when brought together, can address social equity for our region in a very meaningful way and for generations to come. Looking ahead, on April 30th, that's next week, we'll focus on how the regional plan can help support your local planning efforts and shared goals around climate, housing, and mobility. And finally, on May 28th, we will present the draft regional plan and ask that you release it for public review. After we release the draft plan this spring, we will release the draft environmental impact report for public review, and we are planning many opportunities to engage the public this summer, and we'll work to incorporate the feedback before we ask this board to consider adoption of the 2021 regional plan at the end of the calendar year. That concludes our presentation, and I will turn it back to you, Chair Blakespear.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm really impressed with the data and the intellectual rigor of that presentation. It was really fascinating and very well put together. So thank you to our professional staff at Sandag, who just does an outstanding job. So we have now an hour and 15 minutes before the end of this meeting, and I'm working together with the staff to try to make sure these meetings end on time and that we have a quorum until the end. So I see that Supervisor Anderson has his hand up. I want to encourage the public members who'd like to speak. I know we have at least 10 to put your hands up now so that we can get a count on them. And then I will call on Supervisor Anderson, and then we can see if there are any other board questions, and then we'll go to the public. So go ahead, Supervisor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That was an excellent presentation. I represent the Second Forest Supervisoral District, and some of the issues that we face, I wasn't sure how we addressed it, but I'd like to make sure that we're addressing it moving forward. When I looked through our board packet and it defined what minorities were, there was no place for minorities who are Middle Eastern descent. And yet these are people of color. Many of them, English is their second or third language. And we also, when we talk about moving into these communities and soliciting their opinion and input, Arabic and Farsi are more likely to reach them than Spanish. And I would just want to make sure that we're addressing that issue. The other part is, for many people, they may not know that many parts of my district don't have broadband. So if we are counting on the internet for that outreach, we're missing big swaths of poor people that should be part of this inclusionary process. And I just want to bring that to your attention. So as we move forward, that we are addressing those hurdles, those barriers of entry for these people to be included. And, you know, I support equity, but I want to make sure that equity is inclusive for everybody. And I didn't see of those spheres of influence. We know that Spring Valley fits in the SB 535 underserved community. I didn't see any of the groups listed as representing those communities along with my rural communities that would also fall into that SB 535. And I'm sure that most of this is me not knowing how you're doing it and that you're already doing it. And you've done a great job, but I just want to make sure that nobody falls through the cracks and that we're there for everybody in need. Thank you.
Yes, good staff. That's a great question, and we need a clarification on that. So, Colleen?
Yes, I would love to answer that. And I'm also going to ask Tuweri to answer some of the definition questions that the supervisor raised. Those are excellent questions. And just so you know, all the populations you mentioned are being considered. So we would be happy to share more data with you and show that to you, Supervisor. And we care as much as you do about that. The broadband issue is a big issue, and that's why we've assembled a task force to work on that. We're working with partners throughout the state of California on that, because that is key to upward mobility for everyone. And we know how tough it is to make those connections in the rural communities. With your questions about the definitions around the population, I'm going to turn that over to Tuweri.
Thank you. Thank you for the question, Supervisor. So regarding the definition of minority, we use the federal government's FTA's Title VI circular, which defines minority. And yes, it does not include a lot of the Middle Eastern communities, but I would also say that that is also why we do not only look at minority or people of color as one of the metrics that we evaluate in terms of social equity. We also look at low income, because low income you could consider as one of those great equalizers. It includes those people who are of any race or ethnicity background, as well as it includes our senior population. So I hope that that at least provides some clarity as we're using the definition of minority as it's defined by FTA's Title VI circular.
I saw that and I appreciate it. My concern is if they're not considered people of color, perhaps we're not using the languages they speak. So when we have everyone else listed, we are also doing outreach in their native languages. If they're not listed under color, then how do we know that we're using Arabic, we're using Farsi, we're using the languages that they would respond to? Our history has been to forget these people. And yet we know that we are one of the largest concentrations of Middle Eastern people who have emigrated here outside of the Middle East. And so I just want to make sure they're no longer forgotten. Thank you.
Yeah.
And if I may, Chair Shakespeare, just add one thing to, Supervisor, I appreciate your comments, and I appreciate the time you give me the last couple of weeks. On the broadband issue, I just want to, and we're working with your office, we're really pushing hard to have a first pilot in the state of California to be in your district from the 67, and Gustavo from District 11 and myself will work as hard as possible, because I do agree with you. I think broadband issue and the digital divide that exists, it relates directly to the equity consideration. So we're talking to your office, we're trying to figure out the funding, but I hope we'll be able to be the first pilot in the state in terms of closing the gap of digital divide. And yesterday we had a great workshop that some of your office staff participated in. But thank you very much for keeping the broadband issue alive and important to our resident.
I appreciate, excuse me, I appreciate your hard work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Moreno.
I thank you, Supervisor, for your comments. And I have to say, I agree with everything that you just said. My intention when I became the chair of this committee was to actually physically take the meetings on the road, if you will. So my intention was to have a meeting in the north, the east, central, and south, so that members of the respective communities could attend our meetings. Unfortunately, COVID did not allow for that to come to fruition, and we had to quickly get on Zoom, as all of us had to. But just know that that was my intention, to go to these communities. And just to answer or to give you a little bit more information, we do have El Cajon Collaborative that represents the East County, and also the Arabic Nile Sisters that are part of the working group. But I want to thank you for what you said, and we definitely will keep that in consideration. And that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Did Colleen, were you raising your hand to speak after?
Councilmember Moreno said exactly what I was going to say, so that covered. Nothing else to add there. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, I don't see any other hands up, so we'll go to the public comments. We have 15, so I'll let the clerk take it from here.
Thank you, Chair. We have a total of 16 now. I'm going to start with Gretchen Newsom, who will be followed by Yasmin Obeid. Oh, I'm sorry, Chair, could you confirm whether you wanted to do 2 minutes or 3 minutes for the public speakers?
We have enough time to take the full 3 minutes, so we should go ahead and take that.
Great, thank you. Gretchen, you can go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you. Gretchen Newsom speaking on behalf of over 3,500 members of IBEW Local 569. As we have stated in many prior comments and letters, social equity and environmental justice must be prioritized in the Regional Transportation Plan. Today's staff report highlights what we have all witnessed. This pandemic has disproportionately harmed people of color, frontline workers, and communities, and they've been unjustly suffering from dangerous pollution for far too long. We know that the crisis of climate change poses the same threat, and the 5 Big Moves offers a vital opportunity for meaningful change. We want to thank the panel for being with us today, and also the staff for their excellent report, and elevating equity as a core component of our regional transportation discussion and the RTP planning process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I did want to mention also that those 16 comments is where we'll need to close the public comment period. For members of the public, if you'd like to submit your comments in writing, I'm happy to make those a part of the meeting record for today if we're not able to take them verbally. So next we'll go to Yasmin Obeid, who will be followed by Phil Petrie.
Thank you and good morning, everyone. I'm here today wearing 2 hats. So I'm going to start with my first hat. I'm Yasmin Obeid. I'm Muslim Palestinian, and I work as the advocacy coordinator with the Arab Resource Center of San Diego, which is residing in El Cajon. And I really just want to Supervisor Joel Anderson's points about the importance of incorporating Middle Eastern communities who are Arabic and Farsi speakers as well as other languages. We are often erased because census data doesn't often reflect who we are. We're forced to list white on so many of these forms. So I really want to thank the supervisor for bringing that up. And I hope that we continue bring this up in order to ensure that my community as well as other Arab communities are not erased. As the supervisor mentioned, we are concentrated. We have a huge concentration, one of the largest in El Cajon, and we're still getting so many more Syrian communities resettling in San Diego. So please make sure that we are incorporating these languages and we're reaching out to these communities. And then I'm gonna wear my second hat. I'm the youth organizer with Mid-City Can, and really I just want to ensure that when we're speaking about human rights and equity, we're understanding that access to transportation is a human rights issue. Communities need relief and we need it now. And there are key ways that SANDAG could promote immediate and tangible relief for the people who need it most. Specifically increasing access to public bathrooms in transit stations, increasing routes and route frequency, and including youth opportunity passes for riders up to the age of 24 in the RTP. These asks, along with an increase in transparency around how and when our asks will be addressed, are essential to ensuring equity and justice in transportation. I urge you to prioritize these asks, which are part of the 10 big moves to transportation justice in San Diego. And just want to really end with saying, Supervisor Joel Anderson, I'm more than happy for our center to cooperate with your team and learn and work on how we can incorporate Middle Eastern communities and everything we move forward with. Thank you all and have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Thank you very much. Next will be Phil Petrie, followed by Carolina.
Yes, thank you very much. And thanks to all the members of the SANDAG board. This has been a very rich program. My name is Philip Petrie. I'm the acting coordinator of the Interfaith Coalition for Earth Justice. We are a mostly volunteer organization serving to educate, equip, and mobilize faith communities to advocate for environmental justice. And transportation equity is a big part of environmental justice. We need basically three things, and so I'll list these, and there's a couple of specific points, specific asks. Firstly, improve quality of life. More efficient public transportation means a decrease in time spent commuting, especially important during this time of COVID-19. People's lives are impacted by time away from families, education opportunities, or employment. Transportation equity not only means getting an individual from point A to point B, but also means decreasing the need to travel for long periods of time for basic needs. The transit system should also be planned to be time competitive with single occupancy vehicles by overcoming things such as congestion. To do so, it is important that there is an increased development of bus lanes throughout San Diego, as well as increased use of express transit routes. 2, decisions should be based upon equity. Transportation is a social justice issue. People in underserved communities rely on public transportation to get to their jobs, to schools, and to access necessities. Transit rates must not burden the rider. We urge the planning of a youth opportunity pass as a no-cost transit pass for youth 24 and under. It is also essential that low-fare benefits are easy to access, with options to register e-cards by phone as well. Transportation corridors should be prioritized in a way that actively undoes the social injustices in San Diego, and information should also be made available in multiple languages. And thirdly, we must protect the health of our communities and our environment. Reducing greenhouse gas emissions not only helps our efforts with climate change, but also benefits the health of the people living in our communities. Increase public transit and will reduce single person occupancy vehicles, reducing air pollution that disproportionately affects marginalized communities. We want to see a push for zero emission vehicles with a widespread transition of infrastructure to support those vehicles using renewable energy. Places with high transit congestion have a higher concentration of diesel exhaust, which disproportionately harms low-income neighborhoods and communities of color in San Diego. And lastly, I just want to say that we fully support this new emphasis in Sandag on equity that the Sandag leadership has brought forward, and we urge the rest of the Sandag board to do the same. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next will be Carolina, who will be followed by Craig Jones.
Good morning. My name is Carolina with the Environmental Health Coalition and the San Diego Transportation Equity Working Group. Before I give my talking points, I want to make sure to elevate that we think two of our members, Spanish speaker in particular, were not included in the speaker list. And just wanted to ask for an extension of the time to make sure that they're included, especially because they're Spanish speakers. Their names are Alicia Sanchez and Esperanza Gonzalez. So I'll continue on with my talking points. We thank the staff for the report. We also appreciated the panel and all the points elevated about being intentional about equity. Sandag is in a transition to a new area that it's actually going to include environmental justice communities. And we know that it is challenging, but it's something that we cannot afford to delay. So we are here to ask that the regional transportation plan demonstrates clear outcomes to environmental justice communities and a dramatic drop of greenhouse gas emissions in the next 5 years. Our communities have identified the following priorities. We need to have an improved bus system now because our communities are hurting now and they need relief. The good news is that we hear that in the regional transportation plan, there is some investment for bus frequency improvement. However, it's not something that we've seen in the report, so we ask that be reported. We also know that it's being postponed to 2025, and we realize that that might not sound like it's really far away, but our communities have been suffering for too long. So 2025 is just as delayed. So we ask that that be immediately implemented. Also, we see that the Blue Line Express is not included in the regional transportation plan. We ask that the agencies stop taking the Blue Line for granted. It is a line that is overcrowded, is limited in frequency, yet is one of the highest performing transit lines in the West Coast. It's the biggest transit line in our region, and it deserves the biggest move. We ask that you include 24-hour service, a transit system that could serve workers that are working late at night or really early on. The purple line needs to be aligned through City Heights, and it should be alternative one, not a post thinking, but rather the priority. The youth opportunity bus pass needs to be implemented in 2022, not in 2027, as we're hearing. The RTP needs to include support to electrify the bus system early on. Some of the other asks include anti-displacement strategies, activating the bathroom system that we have and adding bathrooms, and an emergency ready transit system. You have one of the most important tasks in our region at this point, and it has to do with justice and also addressing the climate crisis. We ask for your support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Chair, with regard to the two additional public speakers that she mentioned, I already had one on my list. Are you okay with adding one additional?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great. The next speaker will be Craig Jones, followed by Danielle Zhang.
Hi, thank you all for this opportunity. Supervisor Anderson, thank you for raising the concern about Middle Eastern communities in our region. I was going to raise this, you beat us all to it. I am a representative on the Social Equity Working Group representing North County. Both our North County areas and East County have substantial communities of concern subject to inequity today. So it's not just the central area of our region and South County where social equity is a concern, it's actually region-wide. I appreciate the comments of the panel earlier, especially the concern about pricing. Pricing is a concern for equity, and it relates to a point well made by Ray Major that the system we have today for access in our region, requiring access to the private automobile, is substantial inequity. It's terribly expensive to have a private car. So I truly believe that building the 5 Big Moves system that's proposed and realizing its promise will achieve a great deal of equity. I want to emphasize that I think a final measure to achieve equity in the regional transportation plan would be to chronologically prioritize projects and expenditures to provide transportation access geographically first in our disadvantaged communities. Spend the money, build projects to provide transportation access to those areas first. And where are they? Look to the maps that you've been provided. They show geographically where those communities are. I would ask that this be made explicit in writing in the final regional transportation plan. And if we do so, we'll go far to achieving equity in our region. Thank you very much. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Next will be Danielle Zhang, who will be followed by Tristan.
Hi, my name is Danielle Zhang, and I'm just unmute myself. Apologize, I have some construction noise in the background. So I like to present from 3-point view today. Actually, first of all, as a San Diego resident, I lived here for over 17 years and really see there's a great potential for San Diego to be truly American finest city. And also with that saying, as a San Diego resident, I really appreciate Sandag with the leadership and the staff presentations to put forward this great movement to make San Diego to be a finest city through the regional transportation planning. So I like to make a point, being living in San Diego, I'm also, as an immigrant, as someone highly appreciate art and culture, I do attend the film festivals. So just as a board member and people participate here, there's one of my favorite film festival because we are talking about equity. It's called Human Rights Film Festival. It started 2011. So I went to the first season. I'm going back. Every time, if I can, I will attend. So I highly recommend that because knowing what we have, knowing where people come from, and to design the transportation system for the people, not for the cars, is really important. So, but anyway, sorry, I'm going to mute this one. Secondly, from the point of view is I am actually in transportation design. So I'm not working today, but I have a heart to listen, especially this amazing panel discussion with the leader in our industry. So thank you, Georgia Gomez. Great job as a moderator. She actually was recipient for Rosa Parks Award. I also serve on board called Women Transportation Seminar. I'm chair the Diversity and Inclusion Committee for 2021. So as a transportation, unfortunately, our statewide director couldn't present, but I assure you, Talk's vision is just amazing as an employee. I know from our district level and from the state level, and really on board. And I went to training and with talk about his personal experience with implicit bias, and it just inspires me. And third viewpoint, I like to say art and culture should really play a role in transportation planning and design, because we should look at diversity as resources, not something, equitable to contribute, to provide opportunity to make our regions rich. So tap on that resources, not look at it as some lies played role. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Tristan, who will be followed by Ricardo Favela.
Good morning, folks. My name is Tristan Hartley, and I currently live in District 9. This is my second time attending a SANDAG meeting, and I'm honestly shocked at where our elected officials' priorities lie. The fact that translation services had to even be requested is a huge barrier towards your transparency and shows me and the communities exactly who you are prioritizing. Additionally, there was hardly any mention of our LGBTQIA+ community during an equity conversation in a city that is considered by the worldwide LGBT community as a safe haven. As we all saw this past year, communities do care about the decisions that are being made about our lives. It is your time to show that you value the folks that gave you the platforms you sit upon today. And the way you can do that is to uplift our voices. And as the panelists said, listen to our actual needs. One of the many needs that folks have literally been yelling at you all for 10 years is youth opportunity passes for all youth up to the ages of 24. And we want that in 2022, not 2027. I also want to urge you to increase access to public bathrooms and transit stations and increasing routes to communities that are currently underserved, which includes City Heights and the Purple Line. And I also want to increase route frequency. Can you imagine, and literally close your eyes in this moment, if your commute to your place where you're sitting right now took over 2.5 hours, then you had to commute to school afterwards. You're stressed because of a pandemic, you're struggling due to depression, due to isolation, and you feel abandoned by the lack of urgency your elected officials are showing you. As you all find yourselves wanting accountability and transparency at the federal level, we demand the same of you all. So what can you do for us, right? We want tangible things. You can increase your level of transparency and communication around how and when our asks will be addressed. Transportation is a human right and it should be addressed as so. So folks, again, I urge you to hear our voices, promote empathy in your lives, and prioritize these asks, which are part of the 10 big moves towards transportation justice in San Diego. Thank you for your service to our communities. I truly appreciate it. And I look forward to the inclusion of these priorities in the new regional transportation plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Ricardo Favela, and the person following Ricardo, the name I see is just Galaxy S9. Ricardo, you can go ahead when you're ready. You're currently self-muted. Okay, let's move on to the person Galaxy S9, and then we'll come back to Ricardo.
Hi, excuse me. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Maria Cortez, resident of City Heights for 49 years. And I want to say thank you to Georgette and the panelists. They were great. They were awesome. What I'm here about is to support, obviously, the 5 big moves. Also, what we need is to build by the mobility hubs, because you build by the mobility hubs, you will find people being able to use transit and getting to places where we need to go much quicker. Also, we need to have public restrooms, because I feel sorry for the elderly, which I am one of them, an elderly person, but also elderly, but not only just the elderly, but also families that have to use the restroom, but they can't because there are no restrooms there for their children. So I support that. Yes, there should be restrooms there. Also, I am co-chair of ITCH, the Youth Opportunity Bus Passes, as I have been fighting for this with Mid-City CAN and City Heights Development Corporation for 10 years. Okay, actually 11 years. And we need the Youth Opportunity Bus Passes for at least 24 years and under in the next round. I want to applaud you, though, for going ahead and voting for the Youth Opportunity Passes, the one way from 225 to 125. But I would like to see the 24-year in the RTP. I also support the Purple Line. I want it to come through City Heights because we need it. We were promised that going on 44 years now. Nothing should take that long. I am in support with the 5 big moves that we don't need to wait We don't need to wait 40 years, 44 years. We need to get things done now. And also to increase public transit, to make it more frequent, and to have 24-hour service. My husband was looking forward to 24-hour service, but he is retired now. He's been retired for 7 years. So please include this in the RTP also, because we need that for the working people. But me, I've been on the Purple Line for 44 years waiting for it to be done. And I plan on being there. And if not, my ashes will be there one way or another. I'm going to be there. So I am also in support with Sandag with the things that you are doing, finally reaching out to the community, listening to the community, and going out through the community through Zoom. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Ricardo, are you able to unmute yourself now? It doesn't look like it. All right, Ricardo, I'll come back to you again at the end. Next, we'll have Chris Sotomayor, who will be followed by Mike Bullock.
Good afternoon, folks. Chris Sotomayor, Latham Edge, Mid-City Can. I want to start off by pointing the absolute dissonance of talking about equity when we had to request mid-meeting for translation after we specifically asked Sandag staff if translation would be available today. I also want to point out that we're sitting here talking about equity, but folks can't even go to the bathroom at transit stations. Transportation, folks, is a human rights issue, and the long-term plans that are included in the RTP do absolutely nothing to help our communities now. We are in need now. And let me tell you folks something. If you have never missed a job interview because your bus ran late, if you have ever had to pick between a McDonald's cheeseburger for dinner and a bus pass to get home, if you have never had to pee in a public space because you couldn't find a bathroom to relieve yourself in, and if you have logged into a meeting and understood the language that was spoken every single time, you live in a different reality than the people that you are serving. To use Mayor Minto's words, we are serving people with financial embarrassment. And I really appreciate that Freudian slip because it says a lot about how some of you feel toward lower income communities, that being poor is an embarrassment. What is embarrassing is the amount of misunderstanding around the needs of those who are most disadvantaged or how systems of governance are specifically set up to maintain them in poverty. But we don't censor those experiences because some of you are more concerned that people are uncomfortable having to sit in traffic for an extra 20 minutes. You're more concerned about that than the fact that some people, generations of a population, cannot get to the store to get food. It is clear where your priorities are, absolutely clear. We are making our demands clear. And I want to reiterate to you folks that it is not our job to ask you nicely. And we will play respectability politics with you folks and do this little equity song and dance, but we are expecting results now. Specifically, immediately, we are asking for more access to public bathrooms. We are asking for an increase in route frequency and initial consideration of how we can increase bus routes, and also the inclusion of youth opportunity passes in 2022, not 2027, not 2035, but now. Finally, folks, I want to encourage Mr. Wells to please stay off QAnon message boards. Your comments today were rooted in conspiracy theory, misinformation, and you should frankly be embarrassed. We expect all of our elected officials to exhibit critical thinking skills, Mr. Wells. Finally, folks, you have our demands, and we're really looking forward to knowing how these are going to be centered moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Next will be Mike Bullock, followed by Noah.
Okay, thank you. And I really appreciate the opportunity. I think that Sandag taking public comments like this is, has always been one of the best things about Sandag. And I've been coming to these meetings for 14 years. And let me say for the benefit of some of the comments that you've gotten that Sandag has never been better by far. And you know, part of it's AB 805, but still you had to do the change. And you're on the right track, and I want to thank you so much for that. And thank you for focusing on equity for sure. And I want to quote the last sentence in my 3-minute speech at the beginning. I said that the County Central Committee, and I guess you know that's the Democratic Party Central Committee, has adopted resolutions that describe suitable road use charge and car parking systems. And you can be sure that that Central Committee looks at things through an equity lens. If you know Will Rodriguez Kennedy and you know the other people there, you know that that's true. But there is a lot of detail in those resolutions, and that's why I referred you to them. I love the fact that the panel you had talked so much about pricing. I'm so sorry that they didn't include car parking. Like roads, car parking is very, very expensive to provide. And the system that we have now, we think of it as free. It's not, and it is not fair. But hopefully I'll get to that, say a little more to that. But right now I want to quote something from the California Democratic Party platform. It says, support the design and implementation of a single environmentally sound system that will collect and distribute fees for the use of roads, parking, and transit. I love this, all this talk about the youth pass, and I support that, but we really need to also concurrently, we need to have something which is kind of designed from a systems engineering standpoint. And by the way, I talk about my engineering background. When I graduated from high school, I lived in a trailer park, raised by a single mom, and it's kind of a miracle. I was able to get a degree in engineering. I thought I'd just throw that out there. Now I want to talk about how it really is done in terms of parking. People that work for the county go down and they are given what they think of as free parking. How about you do something like this? You say, do you want your free parking this month, or would you like $250? A lot of people would like the $250. And gee, how could we afford that? Well, what do you mean? A parking place could generate between $350 and $400 a month. So everybody would win with this system. And this just shows that we need to focus on good systems and equitable systems. Thank you.
Thank you. Next will be Noah, followed by Brian Pollard.
Good morning, Chair Blakespear and board. This is Noah Harris with Climate Action Campaign. First, I want to thank Sandag and the panelists for today's presentation. Every San Diegan deserves equitable access to mobility options that connect us to our basic needs, from good jobs, education, and medical care to grocery stores and parks. Today, that system does not exist. Low-income communities and communities of color face some of the most devastating consequences of our current system. Dangerously high levels of air pollution from cars and trucks, and disconnected transit trips with low access to job centers. What's more, the climate emergency is barreling down. Extreme heat, wildfires, flooding, and more have and will disproportionately impact those same communities. Transportation accounts for more greenhouse gas emissions than any other sector in the region. Through the 2021 regional plan, you now have a real opportunity to drastically slash emissions towards zero carbon, all while building a more equitable transportation future. We urge you to prioritize investments in historically underinvested communities on the front lines of the climate crisis and environmental injustices. These investments must center the needs of transit-dependent riders and be designed and implemented in consultation with residents and organizations from those communities. Finally, I want to again urge board members to be sure to include in the regional transportation plan youth opportunity passes, which are no-cost transit passes for youth 24 and under, as this is a key investment in our young people. Thank you.
Thank you. Next will be Brian Pollard, followed by Nicole Burgess.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. My name's Barry Pollard. Brian's my birth name. Most people know me by Barry. I work with the Urban Collaborative Project. Our area is in Southeast San Diego, and what I want to do is address two things. One is the equity issues moving forward, and secondly, outreach. I want to thank you all very much for allowing us to make comments on such a vital topic as equity. Equity is more than just words, it's an action. Action focused on providing transportation options to all communities, especially redlined and underserved communities. The regional plan addresses a number of these disparities in transportation. And now it's time for us to not talk about planning anymore, not talk about what needs to happen. I think everybody on this call knows what needs to happen. The issue is now's the time to act. What I mean by acting is it's the time to show your commitment, and this is addressed to the board specifically, to show your commitment through the budget adjustments and project priorities reflecting the purpose of equity in transportation. Talking about equity is not enough. We've been doing that, as you have heard, in some cases for 44 years. And no one is supposed to be waiting that long for anything. So I would like to specifically, in speaking for my folks here in Southeast San Diego and in all underserved and redline communities here in San Diego, we ask the board to support the transportation infrastructure, networks, and opportunities to communities that have been previously ignored. The 5 big moves supplies that remedy. Improving our weakest neighborhoods, improve all of our neighborhoods. The second part is with outreach. And I'm glad it was mentioned, Congresswoman Moreno, but because I have to tell you, it has been a pleasure. I've been part of the outreach, the Sandag Equity Group for quite a while. I have seen Sandag change immensely. And what I want to do is say that it's helped me identify certain census tracts in our community that needs attention. They're the 25% high on the EnviroScreen call list. We're also working with Digital Divide. We're on that subcommittee as well. And the last thing I want to do is the next time we have one of these conversations about equity, I would love to have it at 5:30 or 6 o'clock in the evening so a lot of our residents can really actively participate rather than the CBOs. And that's my story and I'm sticking with it. And thanks for having this conversation, folks.
Thank you very much. Next will be Nicole Burgess. The person following Nicole Burgess, the name I see on your phone is Mars Services, Inc.
Good morning, Sandag. Thank you so much, Chair Blakespear and board members for this opportunity. It was a fabulous panel, and I thank you so much for bringing this discussion to the board. I want to echo a lot of the voices from others, the passion behind Chris, Karina, saying we need it now. It is time. Noah, Barry, Mike Bullock, Sandag has never been better. I agree. I thank you. Many of you know me as an advocate for healthy lifestyles and active transportation and living my life by bike. There is just, I can't underestimate the value of the bike and what an efficient form of transportation it is. And so as I listen to this 2050 plan for transit, and this big 30 years away, we just don't have the time. It's a climate crisis. So looking at those communities that need it now, those 35% of households under 45,000 a year, and where are they really going, that data? And I'm looking at the maps and I see tier 1 employment centers. Is that really where they're going? Or are they going to tier 2 employment districts? Because those hot red marks are all within a 45-minute to an hour bike ride that brings health and economic prosperity to our region, our cities, all even on that 78, we have the Inland Rail Trail. And if we can take this message and share that affluent folks need to realize it's not just a recreational toy, and the low income folks need to know that it's not a sign of poverty. It is an amazing tool. It is the most efficient tool. And we're excited for e-bike incentive bills to come through our state, through national legislation. And we need to design those complete corridors and support the big 5 moves and staff for working in this and mobility hubs, and appreciate that we all understand that housing is critical to this discussion and where we live and how we move within our cities and becoming vibrant and healthy. And just never underestimate the value of bikes, because safe, sexy streets equal vibrant cities and a wonderful economy and a great place to live. Thank you so much for your time and enjoy a ride this weekend.
Thank you very much. The next person will be Mars Services, Inc., who will be followed by Esperanza Gonzalez.
Good morning, everyone. Hi, my name is Dr. Gina Yamut. My background is in sustainability and equity. I am the president of the board of the Arab American Association of Engineers and Architects, the California chapter. I want to thank Supervisor Anderson and everyone else who made for the comment that they made. I was very pleasantly surprised that people of Middle Eastern descent are on his list of priorities. The identity of Americans with Middle Eastern heritage as a minority group has been neglected and marginalized, which has resulted in the community being invisible when it comes to socioeconomic and health data, as well as measures of diversity, equity, and inclusion. The Arab American Association of Engineers and Architects on a national level has been involved in multiple initiatives to tackle these social injustice issues, and we believe that San Diego should be at the forefront of these efforts. Lastly, I would like to invite you all to an event celebrating April, having been declared as Arab American Heritage Month on April 29th. If you're interested in attending, I can provide you with more information. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you, and I look forward for all of our communities here in San Diego to grow together.
And Francesca, hold on a second, just to announce what the interpreter is saying. So he's saying that if you would like to use the interpretation feature, please scroll to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting controls are and click on the interpretation icon, which is the little world, and then select the language. And if you're joining through the Zoom mobile app, please press the ellipsis, which is the 3 dots, and then interpretation, and you can choose your language. So just a little update on the interpretation. So thanks very much, and I'll return to Francesca.
Thank you, Chair. We have 4 remaining speakers. Next will be Esperanza Gonzalez, who will be followed by Alicia Sanchez.
Hola, buenos días. Mi nombre es Esperanza González, residente de la comunidad de City Heights y miembro de la Coalición de Salud Ambiental. Soy un usuario de muchos que dependemos del transporte público en la comunidad de City Heights y estoy abogando para la inversión inmediata en el sistema de autobuses como parte del plan de equidad social. La comunidad de City Heights es y ha sido siempre una de las más afectadas por la contaminación del aire, ya que atraviesa la interestatal 15 y 805 y eso aumenta los efectos del cambio climático. Y mi comunidad es la primera en padecerlos. Necesitamos un plan de tránsito regional ahora que alivie la carga sobre las comunidades. Como ya lo mencioné antes, la interestatal 15 y 805 atraviesan la comunidad de City Heights. Es importante invertir en autobuses que crean un sistema de tránsito de clase mundial. Eso va a disminuir el uso del automóvil y aliviaría mucho a nuestra comunidad de la contaminación del aire tóxico. Los autobuses son importantes porque se pueden implementar rápido y costaría menos la implementación. Es por eso que necesitamos la inversión inmediata en el sistema de autobuses. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much. Next will be Alicia Sanchez, followed by Arun Prem.
Muy buenos días, mi nombre es Alicia Sánchez, soy de National City, promotora de la Coalición de Salud Ambiental. Como residente de National City, estoy aquí para apoyar la línea Azul Express para las personas que necesitamos este servicio. Como residente de National City, sabemos que es una de las comunidades más afectadas por la contaminación del aire y ahora por el COVID. A medida de que aumenten los efectos del cambio climático, mi comunidad sufriría primero. Necesitamos un cambio ahora. Necesitamos un plan de tránsito regional para que ayude a nuestras comunidades de justicia ambiental. La línea Azul Express aumentaría el número de pasajeros al hacer que el sistema de tránsito general sea más eficiente con tiempos cortos y menos gente. Al invertir en la línea Azul Express permitiría a los viajeros dependientes del tránsito que utilizan servicios durante la noche, lo que ayudaría a los trabajadores de la primera línea nocturna, a las personas que viajan desde la línea fronteriza. La línea Azul Express, siendo una de las más usadas de la región, merece más inversión para los beneficios de todas las personas que usamos este servicio. Por eso les pedimos que sea incluida la línea Azul Express en el plan de equidad social. Muchas gracias por su atención.
Thank you. And our final, I believe we've lost Arun. So I'll move on to Ed Balsamo, who will be our last speaker.
I apologize. I don't have a public comment to make.
Okay, thank you very much. Then that concludes the public speakers, Chair.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the public comments. We really appreciate all the engagement on this. We had a great discussion today. And I just want to reiterate that I was really glad that we were able to take that extra week at the beginning or extra 2 weeks between our board meetings to talk about the equity statement and have a unanimous vote of approval on the equity statement. So that was, a great beginning of this conversation, that we're all really engaged in it. And so with that, we are concluding our business for today. So remember that we have a meeting next Friday, April 30th at 9 a.m. and we will see you then. So with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.